Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of True Crime with Kendall Ray. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you're new to the show, then welcome. I hope you stick around. Maybe consider clicking subscribe so you never miss an upload from me. So guys, today we're going to get into a case. It's really, really frustrating, this one, because I really feel that it should have been solved by now. There's a lot of factors that have contributed to it not being solved at this point. But a lot of people agree that it should have been solved at this point, and her family is so desperate for answers because it has been 13 years since she was killed. I wanted to cover this case today because it has really stalled over the years, and I know her family, especially her mother, is so desperate for answers, and she's now in her 90s, and I know it would be so important and so meaningful to her if she was able to get those answers in her life. And I want to start out this episode by saying that I am not completely confident in how to pronounce Sarah's last name. Sarah Greenhalgh is who we're going to be talking about today. And I'm not entirely sure if it's Greenhalgh or Greenhall, but I have heard her mother, I think she pronounced it as Greenhalgh. I have listened to her pronounce it over and over and over, and I'm pretty sure that she is saying Greenhalgh. So not entirely sure there because so many of her coworkers and friends and people who've worked on the case say Greenhall. So I'll just put that out there that I just don't fully know. And I've really tried to figure it out. But Sarah was an awesome person. She was a very determined woman, a very independent woman, and she was an investigative journalist, actually, and a very outspoken one at that. So she really had no problem getting up in other people's business, getting to the truth of things, even if it meant, being in some difficult situations. So when she was found murdered, detectives wondered if maybe her work had led to that maybe along the way on some piece she was working with, she angered someone or someone didn't want something coming out about them that maybe was a potential story she was working on. So that was a big question. But then they also were wondering if maybe this could have been done by someone who she referred to as batshit crazy boy. Although I will say it's possible that maybe it had to do with neither of those things. And that's what's so frustrating about cases like this is we truly don't know. But I'm especially interested to hear all of your thoughts on this case and whether you think at this point in time there's enough to potentially make an arrest. And as a reminder, in cases like this, of course, I always need to say that everyone I speak about today is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. So Sarah Libby Greenhalgh was born in Potomac, Maryland on March 21st, 1964 to her parents Sarah and William. And she also had one sister named Kate. And when they were young, their family ended up moving to a horse farm in Poolesville, Maryland, which was about 15 miles northwest. Now, I'm sure they had a lot of reasons for moving, but I think one of the main reasons had to do with horses, actually. And I don't know if it's still like this, but back when Sarah was younger, this was an area where a lot of people were riding horses and they would have barns right there in their backyard. And Sarah absolutely loved horses. I mean, she loved all animals, to be clear, but there was something about a horse that she especially connected with. And as she got older, she made sure to keep horses as a central part of her life. And if horses were her number one passion, then photography was a close second, and man, was she good at it. When she was pretty young, her grandma actually gave her a Brownie camera, which I had never heard of, but it's like a simple, easy-to-use camera for kids at the time. And aside from when she was writing, you could almost always find her with a camera in her hands, or at least doing something independently. As I said earlier in the episode, Sarah was just a really independent person, and even from a young age, she liked to do things alone, had no problem doing that. I mean, no fear when it came to approaching things independently. And when I say that, I really mean it. Sarah was very brave at a young age, certainly much braver than I was. When she was only 12 years old, you guys, she actually took a trip by herself across the world to Africa. How many 12-year-olds do you know that would be up for doing that or could handle it? But Sarah literally did that. At just 12 years old, she flew alone to Nairobi to visit a friend whose family lived there. And that was really just the beginning of all the travel that she did in her life. One of the things that I thought was especially cool was the fact that she attended an all-girls college preparatory school called Oldfields in Glencoe, Maryland, which is known for not only having a strong academic program, but also having a great equestrian program as well. And even though it was certainly pricey, Sarah did come from a family that was able to send her there. Her dad, who sadly passed away in 1994, was at one point an attorney as well as the associate dean of Georgetown University's law school, which I mention because it's believed that Sarah got her passion for the truth from her father. Now, after she left Oldfield, she went to Columbia University to study journalism, and from there, she moved back to the DC area where she began working as a journalist and photographer for several local newspapers. Which I just have to say, I mean, I'm definitely not an expert in photography, but from what I've seen of her work, she was an incredibly talented photographer. And it makes sense why she, did so well in that field and earned all these awards for her photography. She seemed to have a super keen eye for detail, and that's something that really worked well for her in both aspects of her career. I wasn't able to find this elsewhere, but the Prince William's Times reported that her pictures were once featured in Time magazine, Vanity Fair, The Washington Post, the New York Times, and Fortune magazine. So very, very impressive career. And then as far as her journalism, she worked for several different publications, including but not limited to freelancing for the Washington Post, the Chronicle of the Horse, as well as working for the Winchester Star. And in 2012, the Winchester Star was the job that she was currently working. She wrote about everything from sports and horses to entertainment and government. And if one thing is for sure, it's that Sarah was a force to be reckoned with. I mean, really, out of everything that I learned about her, what I thought was so special about Sarah was her passion for the truth and her passion for getting a story out there. And that's just kind of what I kept coming back to. Basically, if Sarah needed to get to the bottom of something for something she was working on, watch out, because she was going to do it. She did not mince words and was plenty fine making a few enemies along the way, so long as it meant that she told the story that she needed to tell. And I think it's qualities like that that really sets journalists apart from the rest, that really makes for that fantastic journalism. But of course, it is a kind of personality trait that you either loved about someone and respected, or maybe a little bit feared. And whether people liked this about her or not, there was just no denying at the end of the day how people, for the most part, saw her as a really good and loyal person. And I genuinely believe she was those things from what I know about her. And that goes for both her work and her friendships. Sarah, to me, strikes me as someone that you would want in your corner, that you would want as your friend, because she would have your back no matter what. But of course, if you were on the other end of a story, she wasn't afraid to get up in your grill and ask those hard questions, even if they were uncomfortable. And again, I think most people would agree that that is what makes someone an exceptional journalist. And to be clear, she wasn't mean or rude about the way that she did things. She was just very direct and a little bit, I'd say, intense, which, I think made her really good at what she did. Some of her friends from work say that she was the type of person who fought to have her work on the front page, too. She really seemed to be her own best advocate. And in July of 2012, she was on the front page, but not for a reason that anyone would have wanted or could have predicted. And let me go ahead now and provide some more context so that this all makes sense. So in 2012, Sarah was 48 years old and she lived by herself in a one-bedroom cottage in Upperville, which is in Northern Virginia. And her place was sort of like a second home on this large property, and the people that she rented from lived just up the road in the main house on the property. And as for Upperville, it isn't very big, and it's also not very busy, especially in terms of crime. So on July 9th of that year, when everything happened, it was more than shocking. It started at about 8:08 a.m. when an off-duty firefighter called 911 after seeing smoke rising from a house, which we know belonged to Sarah. By 8:22 a.m., a fire crew had arrived on scene and were successful in putting the fire out. But the damage was extensive, to say the least. The structure of the house was still standing, but the inside was pretty much just torched. However, that was the least of everyone's concerns. What they were really concerned about was the fact that a woman's body was found in the bedroom, and she had obvious gunshot wounds, indicating that she didn't die from this fire. And at first, of course, they had no idea who this woman was, But when they ran the plates on the car parked outside, they learned that it belonged to Sarah and that this woman was Sarah. The upper part of her torso had been covered in debris, and there was a 9mm handgun placed not far from her body. And there were also several bullet holes in the walls and door, as well as 12 bullet casings on the floor around her, suggesting that there had been some type of struggle for the weapon. And an autopsy would later reveal that Sarah died as a result of a gunshot wound to her neck, and her manner of death was, in fact, homicide. Now, there was a lot of progress in the case on that first day, the 9th, and obviously the first thing to happen was alerting her friends and family, and to say that they were shocked would be a massive understatement. In fact, her coworkers were in the newsroom when they were told. And they actually found out from the newest reporter who came into the room and asked if anyone knew who Sarah was. And at first, everyone sort of lit up like, yeah, of course we know who Sarah is. I mean, people loved her. But that's when he broke the news. And right off the bat, nobody could wrap their minds around how something like this could happen, especially to Sarah. And as for her mom finding out, she was actually on the phone when a friend of hers ran into the house and told her what happened, and she couldn't even begin to fathom that this was real. And maybe she could have wrapped her mind around it a bit more if it was just an accidental house fire and she was trapped, but murder, she didn't even think that was possible. I mean, she had no idea that anyone would want her daughter dead. She just couldn't even believe that this was what she was hearing. But that is what happened. And as I'm sure you are already putting together, there was nothing accidental about this fire. They not only found pour patterns in the house to indicate that someone had poured an accelerant, but they legitimately found a bottle of charcoal lighter fluid 15 feet inside the door. And clearly, whoever set this fire knew exactly what they were doing when they did so, because there was little to no other evidence collected at the scene. Even the gun and the shell casings came back with no trace evidence. And that being said, the detectives luckily were able to find some clues elsewhere. One of the things that they looked at first was Sarah's car. And what was weird was they noticed that there were some bamboo leaves that were stuck in the trunk of the car, like someone had put the trunk down and the leaves got caught in the door. And this was all strange for a few reasons. For starters, Sarah normally did not park her car there. The son of the property owner, a guy named Colin, came home that morning and he told police that that wasn't somewhere that she normally parked. And then when they opened her trunk, they found all of her personal belongings. I'm talking her phone, her wallet, her laptop, all of those kinds of things. And it may not be necessarily that strange if those items were just in her car, but the fact that they were in her trunk, very strange. So it almost looked like whoever did this had put all of those things in there and then was planning on driving off with her belongings in the car, but maybe they ran out of time as the sun was coming up. And of course, that's just a theory, but I can definitely see how that is plausible. And luckily, law enforcement waited no time getting into this investigation. The detectives did what they almost always do in situations like this, and they decided to look at the last 24 hours of Sarah's life to see if they could find any information there. And believe it or not, Sarah herself was the one to leave behind a seemingly very important clue. Around 11 p.m. on the night of the 8th, Sarah made a Facebook post, and it reads, "Going to be sleeping with the windows wide open, ... Now, if batshit crazy boy would just leave me alone, ... We'll get some much needed rest because tomorrow is Monday and I got a ton of work to do." That was Sarah's last communication. And 9 hours later, she was gone. So what happened and who the hell is batshit crazy boy? Well, a lot of people who were close to Sarah knew that she had been dating, but it was definitely something that she kept as a private part of her life. And she would often refer to guys that she was dating in monikers, like different nicknames almost. So people knew about batshit crazy boy, but they didn't actually know who he was. That is until a coworker of hers, Melissa, started looking through her desk that said John from Gainesville on it, as well as a phone number. But there was also something else written on the paper, and what was weird is it was written in a different color, almost as if it was written on another day, like she had added to it later, or it's possible she wrote it on the same day and just wanted to emphasize this part, and I'm sure you could guess what it said. It said batshit crazy boy. And it's really eerie, actually, because Sarah was really into true crime. And it makes sense, of course, because she was a journalist and, as I explained, loved getting to the bottom of things, figuring things out. So true crime obviously would be right up her alley. But now to be the person whose mystery they were trying to solve, very eerie, and it wasn't lost on anyone. And so when Melissa found this piece of paper with the name, the phone number, and batshit crazy boy, she knew it had to be something significant, so she called detectives right away. And of course, they were very interested in this, so they looked more into the note, and they found out that batshit crazy boy is actually a man named John Kearns. Now, John wasn't home when they got to his apartment, but they did speak with some of the neighbors, and come to find out, he was in a heated exchange the night before with a woman who they quickly learned was Sarah. So Melissa was actually given permission to take on the case, journalistically speaking, and she ended up talking to a lot of the neighbors about what happened. And I guess they overheard John tell Sarah that she wasn't supposed to be there, and it was clear he was super, super angry that she was. Apparently, Sarah even called him an asshole, and the whole thing came across as very heated, which was obviously very interesting to them because not long after this heated argument, Sarah was dead, so it was super important that detectives spoke with him as soon as possible. So they ended up finding him at the auto body shop that he worked at, and he agreed to come into the station for questioning. And his reaction to this whole thing came across as very strange and very cold. When they said that his girlfriend died, he was super matter-of-fact about it, didn't seem shocked or upset. And he even said that he knew what this was all about, and even suggested that maybe Sarah had taken her own life, which is really odd considering that at this point, they only had told him that she died in a fire. And when they asked him about their relationship and why she'd make a post like that, he explained, in his opinion, what the whole argument the night before was even about. It turns out that Mr. Batshit Crazy Boy had another girlfriend. Shocker. And apparently, she was on her way over to his house that night as well. So he got angry with Sarah when she showed up because he didn't want the two of them to see each other. What's interesting, though, is that John mentioned that this other woman never ended up coming over, so no one could account for his alibi. And detectives also found it interesting that he had these cuts and scrapes on his knuckles. So they're seeing red flags right away. But he did explain that it was because he is a martial arts instructor. And not only that, he's actually a black belt. And honestly, they were pretty suspicious of this, but they did confirm that he was telling the truth, at least about being an instructor. Of course, the cuts on his hands could have come from something else, but it wasn't something that anyone could prove, and he was an instructor. So they really couldn't prove anything at this point. But overall, investigators are thinking this looks really strange, and in their opinion, John's behavior wasn't helping the case, and I completely agree with them. I mean, he was acting very odd and, like I said earlier, very cold. And apparently, Sarah had emailed John when she got home after that fight, and their email exchange was also heated. And despite John saying that he had nothing else to hide, it turns out that he deleted all of those emails, which is really unfortunate because we actually don't have access to those emails. We have no idea what they said, but we do have this. According to a search warrant affidavit, quote, she, Sarah, lamented that she listened to all of John's problems, and based upon what he had told her, she could go away for 25 to life as an accessory due to her knowledge of his admissions of wrongdoing to her. So basically, in her emails to him, she was saying that she could go to jail for whatever he has told her. And of course, I don't know what he told her, and I don't know if she was threatening him or what, but I'd definitely be curious to know why he deleted them, and I'm sure there's a reason for that, but of course he wouldn't say. And so they tried pushing him, trying to get him to explain what these emails were all about, explain the whole situation and why he deleted them. And at that point, he went ahead and asked for an attorney, so they had to let him go. And that's definitely not to say that they took their eyes off him, of course not, but they did expand who they were looking into. And Colin, the son of the property owner who I mentioned earlier, was someone that they actually considered. And I guess this was mainly because there were a few people in town who had mentioned that Colin, or they thought that Colin had a crush on Sarah potentially, but After they interviewed him and also did a polygraph test, they ended up just ruling him out. But what's made this case all so tricky was just the lack of evidence, lack of physical evidence and electronic. Search warrants were served on several electronic devices, but it doesn't sound like anything came out of it, at least not that we know of. So they had to pivot again and reconsider who else might want Sarah dead. And that's when they began to wonder, and I'm sure a lot of you have already started thinking about this, but maybe it was someone related to one of the stories that she's done, one of her articles. Maybe she was working on something that pissed someone off or revealed something about them that they didn't want out there. And what do you know? One of her stories raised some red flags. Sarah had been working on this piece about a man named Russell Ebersole, who was being accused of animal abuse. Now, this guy owned and operated a pet farm that she was digging into, and she had made some bold accusations against him. And given how small this town was, of course, a story like that could have completely ruined his business and his reputation. So, as you can imagine, he was not thrilled. And so I guess Russell would call Sarah after her articles went live and just completely berate her. And at one point, she even had mentioned to her coworkers not wanting him to have her personal address, and that if she ever turned up dead, that he should be on the list of suspects. I mean, holy shit, right? This is a major discovery. So naturally, detectives wanted to dig in and see if they could potentially connect him to her murder. And they found out that Sarah was possibly going to testify against this man in the animal abuse case, and he had been suing in civil court for defamation. So obviously, when you know all of that information, it is screaming motive, and detectives definitely felt the same way, but they actually ended up clearing him. And it wasn't totally explained why, and I wish it was because I'm very confused there. But yeah, the case kind of just stalled from there. Several weeks went by after this with no new leads, and everyone was sort of holding their breath, just hoping that something else would come up, a new discovery would be made, something else would happen. And something did happen when they learned about John Kern's ex-wife. So now we're back to John. Her name is Debbie, and it turns out that there were court records with very serious allegations of domestic violence in their relationship. Melissa was actually the one who got a hold of the records, and once she told detectives about it, they were able to bring Debbie in. And listen to this, okay? So according to his ex-wife, John was that type of guy, the type of person that we all know, right? Who came across as the life of the party. And obviously, we know people that come across as the life of the party that are wonderful people all around. But John was one of those people who came across as charismatic and charming, and a lot of people really liked him, but that's not always who he was. And over the course of their relationship, she saw more of him, and it spiraled into a very toxic and abusive situation. Now, they had separated almost exactly a year before Sarah was killed, and it was not smooth. Debbie managed to move into this townhouse to get away from him, and she thought this would make her safe. But at the end of that month, he ended up blowing up her phone with a series of super persistent, creepy text messages. And they all came in minute after minute. I mean, just constant texts. And he was saying things like, I am not going to give up on you regardless of what you say. Just listen. I love you, Debbie, and no one else. I will never love again. I will not stop pursuing you. I love you, Debbie, and I'm not going to give up. I love you, Debbie, and I'm going to tell everyone in this church today. So she finally decides to just respond to him and tells him to stop because it was all just too much. But then a few days later, he ends up calling her, and of course, she didn't answer because why would she? But 10 to 15 minutes later, she and her son, who was from her first marriage, heard a car door slam. So her son looks out the window and he sees that John is standing outside, and then he starts walking towards the front door, which instantly made Debbie panic and call the police. And thankfully she did, because he starts acting completely unhinged. Not only was he pounding on her front door and had punched out her doorbell, but he also stood in front of her window with a hunting knife on his belt, screaming, "You're dead." She says that the look in his eyes was pure terror, and she instantly started screaming out that he was going to kill her, and she was terrified. Thankfully, though, by this point, police sirens could be heard approaching their house, and of course, when John heard that, he decided to leave, but before he did, he slashed her tires and knifed the side of her car, before quickly getting into his own car and speeding off. And Debbie did end up filing an emergency protective order right after this incident, but of course, that did not stop John. Before their first court hearing, he called her to let her know that he had burned all of her stuff. And truly, he did. He burned everything down to her wedding dress. And maybe that wasn't a memory that she even wanted to keep, but still, it just shows you the lengths that this guy was willing to go. So she knows that she needs to get as far away from John as possible. And thankfully, her parents were able to get her out of the state just while the protective order was being finalized, which, by the way, of course, made him even more angry. And it turns out 2 days after the order was served, he got into a road rage incident with a motorcyclist who cut him off. Apparently, he got the motorcyclist to pull over and then he just started wailing on him, like beat the living shit out of him. And thankfully, he was arrested for assault. Now, let's just stop for a second here and put ourselves in the shoes of the detectives on this case, okay? They have a murdered woman who had some kind of relationship with this guy who has a detailed history of violence and at least one documented instance of arson. And then get this. So Debbie also told them that when she was married to John, he admitted to her that he had committed arson on buildings before and that he had tortured animals. And so, of course, it makes sense why they thought of him as a person of interest. Now, I guess he was ordered to take anger management classes in October of 2011, so maybe you could say that he worked through those problems by July of 2012, maybe. But in May of 2012, he stopped going to those classes. And not only was he not going and therefore not getting any help or making any improvement with his anger issues, but he also lied to his probation officer about not going. So a week after Sarah was killed, he was actually arrested and put in jail for like 2 weeks before he posted bail. And that wasn't his first time in jail that year. He had actually been sentenced to 90 days earlier that year, in April, for violating his protective order against Debbie and calling her 23 times in a row. Now, 86 of those days were suspended, so he was only locked up for 4, but the dude was clearly on a downward spiral. And so, with all of this considered, detectives felt, understandably, that it was plausible that he was somehow involved. I mean, you're looking at a man who is clearly prone to violence against women, but also has had violent episodes against men as well. And his life was going less than great. He has a history of arson. I don't know, things are starting to add up here. And again, of course, I have to be really clear. I'm not saying that he did it. I don't know that he did, and he's innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, of course. But I am saying that detectives have had to factor all of this information into what they think happened. And I'm not really sure where their heads are at. I'm not sure what else they have on him or what other information they know that hasn't been released. And clearly, they don't think there is enough evidence at the end of the day to make an arrest, but many people disagree with that. Now, as for his ex-wife, Debbie, and what she thinks, all of this has truly devastated for her, and my heart truly goes out to her. One thing that she has brought up is that she sees a lot of resemblance between herself and Sarah, and I totally see that as well. I mean, just look at the two of them. And she has expressed feeling responsible if her ex was the one who did this. And I can totally understand why she feels that way, but I don't know if she'll ever see this, but Debbie, you are in no way responsible for what happened to Sarah. Just not at all. But I carrying that type of pain and having those feelings are valid feelings to have. I just wish that you didn't have to deal with that at all, because this is in no way your fault in any way, shape, or form. And I'm just sorry that you have to deal with those types of thoughts. That's really horrible. And I think my whole audience will agree that this is in no way your responsibility. So going forward in time here, over the months and years that followed, John has sat down for multiple interviews during which he has adamantly denied being involved. He did agree to give them access to his social media, but could never explain why their communications had been deleted. And yeah, of course, once he lawyered up, there was a lot less that they could ask him. And some of these interviews did get pretty accusatory, but without more direct evidence. Unfortunately, it doesn't sound like they are willing to risk prosecuting him, which, you know, makes a lot of sense. It is something that you want to be very sure of. Oftentimes, well, really, you always only get one shot at it. So you want to make sure you really have your facts straight. And right now, unfortunately, everything they have is just too circumstantial. John has since spoken out and said that this accusation and cloud of suspicion has hurt him greatly, and he waits for the day that he gets the call that someone else was arrested so he can say, "I told you so." And he continues to say that they were only friends and that he has been wrongly targeted by this investigation. Apparently, there have been 3 polygraph tests, which he himself has said he was told he failed. But since he hasn't actually seen these tests for himself, he claims that law enforcement is lying about it. Either way, though, I'm sure you all know that lie detector tests, polygraph tests are not admissible in court anyway. And yeah, if I'm being honest, I definitely have a lot of suspicions towards John. I think there's a lot that just can't be explained and just so many concerning patterns of behavior. But yeah, at the end of the day, there is not enough evidence to point to him as Sarah's killer, which is really, really frustrating. And now years and years have passed, and the hope that her killer will be arrested and that their family will get justice has started to feel like it's fading. Her mom is now in her mid-90s. Oh, my heart breaks for her. She seems like such a sweet woman. And I can't imagine dealing with this type of pain and uncertainty in your 90s. But she says that she hopes that she'll know the truth in her lifetime. And I desperately hope so too. I really hope that she gets those answers that she so desperately just needs. She was featured in an interview in 2017 where she said that she often thinks of everything she could have done differently to prevent this. And of course, as a mother, I think that's a very common thought process to have. I mean, at the end of the day, you always just feel, I think, responsible for your child in some way in most cases. But I hope deep down that she knows that none of this is her fault, just the way that none of this is Debbie's fault. It really breaks my heart to still see her at this age, and it seems like she still blames herself, at least partially. She says there's hardly an hour that goes by where she isn't thinking about her daughter, and she believes that Sarah would be disappointed that nobody seems to be doing anything, even though law enforcement does claim that the case is still active and open. The FBI did join the investigation early on, which was promising, but sadly, there isn't much to show for it. Several search warrants have been executed, one of which was to obtain John's fingerprints, but if anything came of it, we just don't know. Sarah's mom was able to salvage some of her daughter's things from the fire, including some clothing items, which she actually wears to feel close to her. And God, that just breaks my heart. And thankfully, Sarah's camera, which obviously was like a part of her in a lot of ways, did survive the fire. And I know that that's something her loved ones are incredibly grateful for, and I'm so glad that they have that. And to give you a sense of how big of an impact her death made, there were over 300 people who gathered at Trinity Episcopal Church, which is where she was later laid to rest. A handful of people spoke, talking about Sarah's smile, her sass, her pursuit of the truth, her grit, her fearlessness, and everything that she did. This took place on July 20th of 2012, and at that time, her friends and family asked her fellow community of journalists to never give up on her story, and many of them still haven't to this day. Melissa still keeps up the notes that she took looking into Sarah's case in the event that this one day goes to trial. And on her birthday in 2013, her friends, her family, and her coworkers gathered to share stories and memories about the ever-outspoken Sarah, whose death has changed all of their lives forever. I guess that she was someone that thought of her birthday as sort of a national holiday, and I love that about her. So it was really important to everyone that they celebrated her birthday the way that she would have wanted to. And while it's almost been 13 years since her murder, her legacy really has never been forgotten. And I don't think her loved ones, her coworkers, friends, family will ever let her legacy be forgotten. Sarah really lived her life by the saying, Carpe diem. It was actually her license plate. And although her life was taken at just 48 years old, I'd like to believe she seized as many days as she could. And it certainly seemed that way from what I've been able to learn about her. And also the fact that she held the truth in such high regard is very admirable. And she, fought for the truth in her work. And that gives me a lot of hope that maybe karmically, the truth will be revealed in her case, and that maybe one day she and all of her loved ones can finally get the justice that they all deserve. And lastly, of course, if you happen to have any information on her murder, even if it's something that may seem small to you, please contact the Fauquier County Sheriff's Office at 540 347 3300. Well, guys, that is unfortunately all I have for you. I so wish that there were a conclusion and justice for Sarah at this point in time. Unfortunately, there's not. But as always, I want to hear your thoughts on this case. So let me know down below. And I will be back next week to discuss yet another case. And until then, please stay safe out there. Why, hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of True Crime with Kendall Ray. Thank you so much for joining me today. As always, I truly appreciate you spending your time with me. And to those of you who are new to the show, welcome. So happy to have you here, and I hope you consider clicking subscribe so that you never miss an upload from me. So guys, today we're getting into a case that, it's like one of those where I just want to bash my head on the wall. It is so frustrating, so unnecessary, and the killer in this case is such an idiot. I can't believe people still try to do the things that he has done in the way that he has done it. It is so ridiculous. And the victim in this case, Betty Bowman, was such a beautiful soul. She was so kind, incredibly smart. She was a pharmacist at the Mayo Clinic, nonetheless, and from what I've heard about her, from what I've read about her, she seemed to just be such a genuine person, one of the warmest and kindest people that so many had ever come across. From what I understand about her, Betty seemed to be someone who took time to enjoy the little things in life, appreciated every little bit of life's beauty. Like, I've heard an example where she would sometimes be late to things because she would stop and take in a rainbow. How many of us, when we see something beautiful outside, like a rainbow, for example, and we're running late, would take the time to stop and just enjoy it? Not many. She's described as someone who people feel they were lucky to know, lucky to have in their lives, and obviously, I am telling you about her today and her story because her life was taken. And while the person who is accused of killing her has not yet been found guilty, many believe that the evidence is hard to ignore, myself included, and I feel like most of you will agree. And that being said, of course, everyone I speak about in this episode is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. So Betty Jo Sponsel was born on December 13th, 1990 in Wichita, Kansas to her parents Nancy and David, and she had one sister named Brianna. And she has been described as many great things, and I've already gone over some of those, but two things that really stood out to me most was her kindness and her intelligence. Her mom said that even when she was young, Betty never was the type to yell or scream or get mad at anybody. She just had a very chill vibe about her, and she especially never talked negatively about other people. And that's something I find to be very rare in humans. I mean, I think we are all guilty of doing that, but that's something that her mom and others have noted, is that she just didn't really have that in her. She was just wanted the best for everyone else and was kind in the way she spoke about other people. She was also someone who always made the time for the people she loved and approached everything in life with a caring heart. I've also heard her described as someone who could really restore your faith in humanity. And if that's not one of the best qualities, one of the best ways that someone can describe a person, one of the best compliments, then I don't know what is. Betty was described as a true, genuine friend, an incredible daughter, and someone that people really just felt lucky to know. And I cannot forget about her dog. Such a cute dog. I love corgis, and she had the best name for her corgi, Sir Crumpet II. I mean, that is seriously one of the best names I've ever heard for a dog. And Sir Crumpet II was her world. So as you can imagine, she took him to as many places that she could. I mean, he was with her as often as she could have him around. Betty was someone who really loved to travel, and when he could go with her, Crumpet was a great companion. She also was outrageously smart. And in 2017, she graduated from the University of Kansas's School of Pharmacy with a doctorate in pharmaceuticals. And a year after that, she completed her residency at a hospital in Topeka. KU is also where she got her undergraduate degree, and it just so happened to be where she met her future husband, Connor Bowman. Now, Connor was 2 years younger than her, but he was on somewhat of a similar trajectory with his career as she was. Like Betty, he got his doctorate degree in pharmacy as well from KU, but afterwards he started medical school at KU's Medical Center. And both of them, as of 2023, were employed by the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. Betty as a pharmacist and Connor as an internal medicine resident, which is obviously very impressive. If you aren't aware, the Mayo Clinic is one of the best hospitals in the country, and is just highly regarded. It's so competitive, so hard to get into. So it's very impressive that both of them were there. And Connor and Betty had gotten married in May of 2021 in Independence, Missouri. But with their work, Rochester is where they would end up living. And I wish I could say that things were going well there as far as their relationship goes, but that wasn't necessarily the case. I mean, really wasn't the case at all. And I need to give some context here. So Betty and Connor were in an open relationship, which is totally fine, really works for some people, but as you probably know from people in your life who are in open relationships or things you've just heard, it can be really, really challenging. But it was something that they both wanted to do. It was something, they agreed upon and were happy with, at least for a little while. But it did come with one pretty big condition, which was that neither of them could get emotionally attached to anyone else, which seems to be a common rule that people set in open relationships, and it totally makes sense. To my understanding, they were basically allowed to be physical with other people, but as soon as any kind of emotional attachment formed or, wanting it to be something more than that, it was important that they broke it off. Now, I'm definitely not an expert in open relationships. I actually don't know anyone who has been in an open relationship, so I don't even have any personal context or comparison, but I know in monogamous relationships, communication is everything, and I'm sure this applies to any type of relationship in general. And in their situation, this was all that they were really asking of the other person, to communicate. And I'm sure you see where this is going, but Connor was not honest with Betty. You see, there was a woman that Connor started seeing, and according to friends, he became infatuated with this other woman. I mean, almost obsessed with, you could say. And Betty just over time started to realize it. And so at one point, he and this other woman broke up. And I guess he was super, super depressed over it, more than he should be for a woman that, according to their agreement, he never should have been so attached to in the first place, right? And eventually, it got to the point where Betty told him that if he couldn't choose her over this other person, then it was time for them to probably get divorce proceedings started. And honestly, I do believe that she was inching towards divorce anyway, because Connor had also been lying to her about money. And as we all know, that is actually one of the top reasons, if not the top reason, I could be mistaken, but it's definitely up there in like the top 3 reasons that people end up getting a divorce. And Betty knew that he had a ton of debt from medical school, and because of that, they actually kept separate bank accounts, which was very smart on her part. But apparently, one day she was just going through the mail, and that's how she ended up finding out that he was lying to her about how much debt he was actually in. And he was in quite a bit of debt, $500,000 to be exact. Now, at this point in time, there aren't that many details about this, but it was definitely clear to her that he had been keeping secrets. And not to mention, the two of them also did not have the same opinion when it came to having kids. Connor wanted them, and Betty just wasn't quite ready. Her friends and family say that they all wanted her to leave Connor. And while they tried to get her to go, she was a second chance type of person. And personally, I think being able to give someone a second chance can be a great quality in a person. I always go back to this lyric from one of my favorite songs from Gregory Alan Isakov. And it's, if there weren't second chances, then we'd all be alone. So I think in most situations, a second chance can be a great thing, right? And it's a great quality of Betty that she was willing to give him that second chance. So even when he was actively lying to her, Betty had hope that maybe he would change. And I don't know if Connor was capable of changing or if he wanted to change, because that's really the main ingredient that someone needs if they're going to actually make their life better or make their relationship better or whatever it is. They've got to want to do it themselves. You can bring a horse to water, you can't make it drink. Which brings me to August 16th of 2023. This was the day that Betty was admitted to the Mayo Clinic for what she believed was food poisoning. She'd been having diarrhea since like 2 a.m. and she was incredibly dehydrated. And so food poisoning kind of made sense. And that's what doctors also figured it was too. And that's what they treated her for. The problem, though, is that she wasn't responding to any of the typical treatment that they would do for food poisoning. In fact, Betty was getting progressively worse. Over the course of 4 days, she experienced cardiac issues, fluid in her lungs, organ failure, and even had to undergo emergency surgery to remove a portion of her colon after they discovered that some of the tissue had died. And during this time, her mom, her sister, and also over a dozen friends came to visit her, but none of them could make sense of how Betty got so sick so suddenly. Eventually, in the hospital, she became unconscious, and you got to remember, we're talking about an otherwise perfectly healthy 32-year-old woman who worked in healthcare. So to go from perfectly fine to having all of these major issues and going completely unconscious in the hospital, people couldn't wrap their mind around what was going on here. What's wrong with Betty? And doctors couldn't even really understand what was going on. But Connor, he had an explanation. Now, HLH stands for a condition that is very, very hard to say. I'm going to do my best, but bear with me. HLH stands for hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis. And HLH is rare. It's a life-threatening disorder where the immune system attacks its own blood cells and organs. And Connor was telling people that this is what Betty had. And because your average person doesn't know what HLH is, it wasn't really something that they questioned. Plus, if you were to Google it, you would see that the symptoms of HLH really mirrored what Betty was experiencing. I mean, the diarrhea, the organ failure, everything. It's also super hard to diagnose, which is why many people believe that he suggested it in the first place. But here's the thing, though. Betty did not have HLH. And we know that because Connor asked doctors to run a test for it, and it came back inconclusive. Don't forget, Connor was a med student and a resident at that hospital, so he wasn't some average Joe telling these doctors what to do. He had some credibility here. I mean, not a lot, but some. But despite the results coming back as inconclusive, he still confidently told people that that's what Betty had, and ultimately, it's what he told people that she died from. Because on August 20th, 4 days after being admitted, Betty passed away from organ failure, but her exact cause of death had yet to be determined. Now, because the circumstances of her death were so sudden, the hospital sent her body to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. Here's where things get super, super weird, though, okay? Connor not only attempted to cancel the autopsy, but he practically begged them to cremate her immediately. Big red flag, right? And he said that this was because his wife didn't want to be a cadaver, so they needed to do this right away. He insisted that her death was natural and that they should just trust him and skip everything that they were planning to do to figure out why she died. And obviously, most of the time when a loved one dies suddenly and you don't have answers as to what happened, most people want to go forward with an autopsy and try to figure it out. Most people, of course. In some cases, you may not want to for whatever reason, but the reasons that Connor had were certainly not good reasons. And after all of that, he then emailed someone from the medical examiner's office asking if the toxicology analysis that they were planning to do was more thorough than the one that the hospital performed. And he even asked for a list of what exactly they planned to test for. So red flags with Connor are popping up left and right here. And luckily, and not surprisingly, the medical examiner's office thought that this was a strange request too. Oh, and apparently, a day after Betty died, while Connor was being weird, a friend called the medical examiner's office and reported that he and Betty were having problems in their marriage. Problems that we've already talked about, things like infidelity and plans for a divorce. So that call, plus Connor's just strange behavior and weird requests, made them think, something is not right here. And They not only ignored him and did the autopsy anyway, but they also alerted the Rochester Police Department that something was up. Now, I don't want to deviate too far from the investigation, but just listen to this. After Betty passed away, Connor wrote her obituary, and despite HLH not being her cause of death, he still listed that she died from a, quote, sudden onset autoimmune disease and infectious illness. And I think, understandably, a lot of her friends and family were sort of torn about what they thought had happened. I mean, on one hand, they considered Betty a healthy person. I mean, certainly not an unhealthy person. And at no point had she ever mentioned having this rare autoimmune disorder, which felt suspicious. And on the other hand, it's not like any of them were outwardly talking about their health problems. So they figured maybe this was something that she just kept to herself, which, of course, people do keep health conditions to themselves, and it's absolutely their right to do so. So overall, it seems like most people in her life were just feeling confused. And one thing's for sure, everyone in her life was just shocked. And especially, well, almost everybody was really besides themselves with grief, understandably. Connor, though, as you could have guessed, not so much. And his behavior got even weirder because one of Betty's closest friends, her name is Sarah, later told investigators that only 3 days after Betty died, that girl that he had been seeing came over to the house. And by that point, Connor had already taken down all of Betty's photos. Why would anyone do this? Why would any grieving husband do this? I mean, you just wouldn't, right? I mean, maybe in certain situations, I don't want to have like a blanket, everyone wouldn't do this. I think it's very rare to take down all their photos. Of course, I'm sure there are people who just can't, look at the person in those moments or whatever the case may be. But this really stood out to people as very strange behavior, understandably so. Not to mention, her friend Sarah felt like Connor was sort of just indifferent, almost even happy, even though his wife had just suddenly died. And I guess he even invited some of Betty's friends over to take some of her belongings. And this is when Sarah witnessed Connor smiling, hugging, and kissing this other girl that he had been seeing. Now, obviously, we do know that they were in an open relationship, but it just felt like he wasn't showing any signs of grief at all. And let's be honest, I mean, we know that Betty was not okay with Connor's relationship with this other woman because it had turned into more of an emotional attachment versus just a casual hookup or, situation like that. And so overall, it's pretty disrespectful if you ask me. I mean, if you ask really anyone to be bringing this person around after your wife has just died into your home. And if you think all of that is bizarre, just wait until you hear everything else that they uncovered during their investigation. So once the Rochester Police Department got involved, things moved very fast. After speaking with some of Betty's friends and family, as well as executing a few search warrants, they realized that their suspicions may have been spot on. Detective Kendrick took the lead on the case, and he spoke to a guy that Betty was dating. And remember, there's nothing wrong with her dating. It was a casual situation as far as we know. And they just refer to this guy as SS. I'm not sure what his name is, and it doesn't really matter. That's just how he is referred to in the criminal complaint. And he shed some light on what the days were like leading up to her death. According to this guy, SS, he and Betty were messaging on August 14th, which is when she told him that she had the next few days off of work. Betty had mentioned to him that she was looking forward to spending some time with him during these couple of days off. And on the 15th, the two of them did see each other, and they also continued to message on and off throughout the day. And then that night, though, Betty mentioned something important to the case. She told this guy that she was at home with Connor and the two of them were drinking. And I don't believe they were heavily drinking or anything. She had just mentioned that she had a drink. And then the next morning, she said something even more interesting. She told this guy, SS, that she couldn't see him that day because she had been getting sick since 2 a.m., which she herself attributed to the drink that Connor had made for her, which he had actually mixed into a smoothie. Now, She said it was so bad that she hadn't slept, she couldn't even walk, actually, and that she needed to go to the emergency room. So it was bad, and she knew it was bad. Betty also mentioned that she thinks the reason that she was sick was because of the smoothie that Connor had made for her. Now, SS said that he immediately felt like something was really weird here because he knew that Connor wasn't really the type of guy to make her a smoothie. And it wasn't until days later, after Betty had passed, that he realized how weird it actually was. And then there was Sarah's conversation with detectives. Now, she is referred to as SEL in the criminal complaint, but we now do know that it was her. And she explained that she also had texted Betty on the 16th, and that's when she learned that her friend was super sick and going to the hospital. And Betty even mentioned that things were going downhill. And of course, Sarah thought the whole thing was strange because, as far as she knew, Betty was a really healthy person. Oh, and listen to this. Apparently, right after she died, Connor told Sarah that he was going to get $500,000 from her life insurance policy. Ding, ding, ding. I'm sure a lot of you can see where this is going because this happens so very often. And I'm sorry, but who is thinking about money? Life insurance policies right after your wife dies, the love of your life, or who is supposed to be dies. Maybe someone who was also coincidentally $500,000 in debt? Pretty interesting if you ask me. And then Sarah was also the person who told detectives about Betty and Connor's separate bank accounts, because of his debt. And I'm sure things are really starting to click here for you, and it was clicking for investigators as well. And guess what? It gets even worse because imagine what Connor had been doing the last 6 years. He had worked for the Poison Control Center at the University of Kansas Health System. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with what a Poison Control Center does. People call if they have ingested something or if someone they know, maybe even a child, has accidentally ingested something that could potentially be poison, and the operators then advise them on if they need medical attention or not, which, as I'm sure you would probably guess, gave him certain knowledge and access to information regarding different types of poison. And so they searched the laptop that the university had provided him, and it revealed something that you are all going to find very interesting. And real quickly, for some context here, it was actually an employee of KU who contacted detectives and told them that they had information that they should probably know about. And here's what they said. Apparently, Connor told them that he was a suspect in his wife's death, and that prompted them to pull his data. And this dumbass must have thought that his searches were private because the computer had a VPN authentication installed, which just means that the computer had to verify that it was Connor before he could access the secure network. But little did dummy-dums know, his employers could actually see everything that he was looking up. And what's even crazier is this is something that his employers had told him when he got the computer, and I guess he just forgot because listen to this. Connor was over here researching colchicine. Now, we have talked about colchicine before, and I'm sure many of your heads are already going in this direction because of the symptoms that she was experiencing. I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but back in 2023, I covered the case of Mary Yoder. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it below, but that was, I think, the first case where I personally heard about colchicine. But if you don't know what it is, it's actually a medication that they use to treat gout, but it's highly toxic if you take too much of it or if you take it when you don't need it. And here's why they knew right away that this was suspicious, because investigators learned that Connor never received a call about colchicine or even about gout, and neither did any of his coworkers. So there was absolutely no reason that Connor needed to be looking up colchicine, and he made that search on August 5th, in addition to also searching for these things. And get ready, because it is so dumb. I really can't believe that where we are in society in, this day and age with technology, that people still don't understand that if you search for these things, investigators are going to find out. But let's go over some of those things that he was looking up, starting with internet browsing history. Can it be used in court? Police track package deliver. And delete Amazon data police. He also looked up VPN, sodium nitrate, and Google shop pages for vendors selling sodium nitrate. Now, sodium nitrate, I'm sure many of you know, is actually very common. It's used in food preservation. So think of cured meats like hot dogs, maybe sausage. It keeps food from going bad. But if it is consumed in high doses, it can be lethal. And it's also important to note that it is water soluble, so it dissolves in water quickly and would be pretty easy to hide in something like, I don't know, a smoothie. And then on August 10th, Connor searched food versus industrial grade sodium nitrate, and he accessed a medical journal that discussed the lethality of different substances. And then he used his computer to convert Betty's weight to kilograms, and then he multiplied it by 0.8, and 0.8 is considered the lethal dose for colchicine. So that shows us that he was allegedly looking into how much colchicine he would need to give Betty in order for her to die. And the following day, he went onto the GoodRx website and looked up liquid colchicine. And around that time, he visited the website stripe.com, which is an online payment platform. It's also been reported that he bought a gift card for an online pharmacy which sells, you guessed it, colchicine. And later on, investigators learned that he made a $52 purchase for colchicine from the website truepill.com, and he did so using his Mayo Clinic employee email. That's right. He used his employee email to make the purchase. I mean, there are really no words to describe what a dumbass this man truly is. And this is also a fun fact. He also made a fun little purchase for an erectile dysfunction drug. Trouble getting hard, after knowing what you're going to be doing to your wife, potentially. And if all of that weren't enough, Connor then allegedly reached out to the online pharmacy provider and asked them to delete his account and delete his purchase history because he said that his wife fraudulently made these purchases pretending to be him. But wait, there's more. Connor was apparently accessing Betty's patient portal and health records without the hospital's consent. Well, initially she did give him access to look at it and review it, but when she died, that access went away. However, Connor doesn't seem to care about much and doesn't really think through anything he does, it seems, so he went in and accessed it anyway. And on the 22nd, he apparently created a documentation encounter, but he didn't do anything to it. So he basically created a blank note. And in doing so, he was identified as part of her care team, which allowed him to look at her records without entering his credentials. And according to the criminal complaint, from August 23rd through the 31st, he was viewing images, medications, notes, and other encounters. And clearly, this is a big no-no. And anyone that works in the medical field or really any professional field knows that you can't be doing shit like this. But Connor is stupid. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. And it never really ceases to amaze me how stupid people can actually be. But as I always say, we love stupid because stupid gets caught. And the other thing I always say, and that I will never understand, is why you don't just get a damn divorce. Why is killing someone a better option in someone's mind? It is so twisted, I will seriously never get it. And it's going to be so much easier than going to jail for the rest of your life, potentially. And thankfully, that is what Connor is facing. On October 20th, 2023, after her blood and urine samples contained elevated levels of colchicine in her system, Connor Bowman was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. He had the option of either a $2 million conditional bail, where he would have to wear a GPS monitor, or a $5 million unconditional bail. And ultimately, they have found no evidence to suggest that Betty had gout. And they also knew that the hospital never administered colchicine to her, meaning that there was only one explanation for how it got into her system, and that's that she was poisoned. And obviously, at this point, Connor's involvement is, of course, alleged, but Betty's cause of death certainly isn't. It is a fact that colchicine is what killed Betty and that her manner of death is homicide. And with all the evidence that I just presented to you, investigators were able to go ahead and make the arrest. They also executed a search warrant on his house where they ended up finding a receipt for a $450,000 bank deposit. It's not explained in much detail, but I think The implication here, obviously, is that this money came from her life insurance. And clearly, that amount is almost equal to what Connor owed. So this suggests a potential motive. Now, after he was arrested, I think things started to really click for people in her life. Things were making sense about the weird comments that he was making and the behaviors that he was exhibiting right after Betty died. And here are a few examples. After her funeral, Connor was talking to a mutual friend, a friend that went to medical school, and he was asking in her professional opinion what she thought of Betty's lab reports. And in the moment, they thought that he was just trying to make sense of her sudden death, of course. But now they think it's possible that he was trying to gauge whether anyone could see something that would point to his guilt.
At the time, nothing seemed out of place or unusual. But I start to look back now and you think, well, maybe, what was that about? Well, it's just you just start getting haunted by little things that you would think nothing of at the time, because why would you?
And then we need to talk about Betty's funeral, because that's also an interesting topic here, because it happened before Connor was arrested, and he was actually the one who planned the funeral, which was not surprising. It actually was alarmingly clear, as many people who attended have said, because the whole thing felt like it was kind of about him. There weren't any pictures of Betty with her family. And Sarah said it almost felt like Connor was trying to prove how close the two of them were. But what's strange about that, though, is Connor ended up not showing up to the celebration of life that her family had hosted for Betty, which is just so disrespectful and totally bizarre. But I guess in hindsight, I'm really glad that his sorry ass didn't go, because at least then they can have that memory untainted by his, who knows what weird behavior he would have exhibited there. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about the celebration of life event that her family hosted. And I love this, but the celebration was rainbow, pride, and corgi theme, because those were the things that were most important to Betty. I don't believe I mentioned this earlier, but she was bisexual and was a proud member of the LGBTQ plus community. Her family even had people donate to the Trevor Project in her memory, which is the leading suicide prevention and crisis intervention nonprofit organization for LGBTQ plus young people. Now, Connor also asked people to make donations there, and he raised $4,000 for the organization, which is the only, and I mean only, props I will give him. And I don't even feel like he really deserves that, because I think that was more performative than anything. And another strange thing Connor did is he went up to some of her friends and asked them what they told investigators, which in my opinion shouldn't really matter if you didn't do anything, right? And unfortunately, this case and Connor's behavior got even worse, because it turns out that this alleged incident wasn't the first time that he may have tried to poison her. Of course, this is not confirmed, at least in any legal capacity, but a friend of Betty's reported that on August 10th, Connor made Betty a smoothie. And this friend was actually at the house when Betty started to drink it, and I guess it tasted strange to her, so she had this friend take a sip. And apparently when she did, it tasted bitter and salty, which of course is not something that most people are expecting when you take a sip of a smoothie. And the friend actually, this is eerie, joked with Betty that maybe Connor was trying to poison her. And I believe that this was completely, meant as a joke at the time. In hindsight, it is 2020, of course. But I guess Betty sort of joked along with her. They kind of laughed about it and then just chucked the smoothie and forgot about the whole thing. But this friend even mentioned that she thought the fact that he made her a smoothie to begin with was strange, because as she put it, he never made anything for anybody. It seems so weird to me that Betty and Connor were even together in the first place, because Betty is described as this person who is so caring, willing to do anything for anybody. And Connor, it would surprise people if he would do something as little as make a smoothie for his wife. I don't know. It's bizarre. But once investigators learned about this, looking back, they wonder if this had been the first attempt. And of course, we don't know for sure, but it seems that way. So kind of in the background of all of this, there were a number of search warrants that were being executed, and mostly on electronic data like computers, bank accounts, phones, those kinds of things. And that's actually how they ended up getting a lot of information about how and when Connor purchased the colchicine. And earlier, I told you that he bought it through TruePill, but the specific retailer was actually Mark Cuban's Cost Plus drug company. And also, through these search warrants, they were able to find more about Connor's search history. And it keeps getting dumber, you guys, because we learned that 2 days before Betty died, he Googled, "Is widow gender neutral?" Like, he was trying to figure out if widow was a gender neutral term, like, guessing because he was wondering if it would apply to him. And he was also looking up a substance called oil of wintergreen, which, like sodium nitrate, can be poisonous if too much is ingested. So things were really not looking good for Mr. Connor, and investigators also learned about some of his online activity after she died. And get prepared to be pissed off, you guys. Rocks for Brains over here was back on Bumble only 9 days after she died. And on September 5th, he actually changed his profile on Bumble to indicate that he was a widow. You know, bring in the sympathy. I mean, truly, what a sick, heartless person to just be back on these dating apps as if nothing had happened only 9 days later. I mean, I don't know if this man even has a heart in his body. And one of the women that he was talking with on Bumble actually asked if he was okay to be flirting so soon after his wife had passed. And Connor legitimately told her that this is what his wife would have wanted. I mean, truly, what a sick person. I mean, of course, I don't know Betty personally, but I can imagine what she would have wanted was the opportunity to divorce you and to still be alive. But what do I know? And it gets even worse because Connor was telling a few different women a few different stories about Betty's death. Like, what killed her? There was a different explanation for everyone as far as when she died, how she died, etc. I mean, he was just really seeking the sympathy to, bring women in. I mean, how sick can you be? He even told one of them that she died of listeria poisoning over a year ago. And then he told someone else that she died from a morphine overdose earlier that summer. And he even told one woman about the $500,000 life insurance policy. And he was already telling some of his friends about that as well. So essentially, this man was bragging about the large amount of insurance money he was about to make off of his dead wife. I mean, what a sicko. There really aren't any words for Connor. And obviously, all of this makes him look like a heartless, sick asshole, but it also doesn't make him look good in the eyes of the law. Because with his knowledge of poison and his background in medicine, anything other than grieving is naturally going to make him seem suspicious. So the fact that he was just outwardly blabbing to a lot of just random people that he didn't even know about the money, I mean, yikes, dude. And again, it's all still alleged at this point, but a lot of his actions here are clearly suggesting premeditation. And while he wasn't initially charged with premeditated murder, they did eventually tack that on. On January 5th, 2024, Connor was indicted on a single charge of first-degree murder, which is in addition to the second-degree charge that he was already facing. And if he is convicted, and I really, really hope he is, he faces a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. And I wish I had a trial date that I could give you guys at this point in time, but it seems that that is still up in the air and there's been a few delays and whatnot. And sometimes it does just take a while for trials to be scheduled. It's just the nature of it, especially because there are a few hearings that need to take place beforehand. The defense, no surprise here, has tried to get a ton of evidence thrown out, especially when it relates to the electronic data, but for the most part, those efforts have luckily been unsuccessful. And back in June of 2024, his attorneys filed 12 motions, and later in August, the response was that their motions weren't specific enough. So they had the chance to go back and explain why they wanted certain evidence to be tossed. And basically, the two big questions at stake are whether Connor had a reasonable expectation of privacy while using his work computer, and whether the warrants had enough probable cause to seize that information. Now, there was a hearing in September to go over these questions, which, again, the defense really tried to question the validity of the search warrants and the scope of what information was seized. The thing is, though, they still weren't being specific enough about what evidence they believe was obtained without probable cause. So the judge basically had to be like, okay, you have until the end of the month to spell this out more clearly. And then in October, the judge ruled that 5 of their 12 motions were straight up dismissed. So I'm sure you're wondering about the other motions. Well, 5 of the motions she still hadn't decided on, and she said they would be discussed at a later date. And then 2 of their motions she did actually end up ruling in their favor. She said that he did have the reasonable expectation of privacy related to motions 4 and 9. And motion 4 discussed the 14 electronic devices that were seized from the Bowman house. And then motion 9 had to do with Connor searching and using the website TruePill, as well as Mark Cuban's Cost Plus drug company. And if you remember, that's where he allegedly purchased the colchicine. But fear not, because this did not mean that the evidence was thrown out. All it means is that the defense is able to challenge the admissibility and possibly have it excluded from being brought up in the trial. Possibly. And on February 10th of 2025, they were back in court challenging it all over again. Both sides called a witness to the stand, and it sounds like it was a lot of the same thing, really. The defense's witness spoke to how much data was collected and how the amount of data they got was beyond the scope of the search warrants. And the prosecution's witness spoke about how the data was extracted and explained that they basically can't pick and choose what information they receive. But he assured the judge that any non-evidentiary information would not be considered in their investigation.
Today, protecting the privacy of patients while reviewing electronic data for trial was the focus of the defense and prosecution. KIMT News 37 Berg was in the courtroom while Bowman appeared for a contested omnibus hearing. He has the latest breakdown from the courtroom. Evan.
Just a big sticking point for the past several months of this case has been files that were seized by the Rochester Police Department's Technology Forensics Unit, and whether or not any medical records seized during that search violated the scope of RPD's warrant. Over 9 terabytes of data were seized from Bowman's work laptops, his personal computer, and his iPhone. Today, the court went over the files seized from his personal devices. Bowman's defense is seeking to find evidence of medical privacy violations and exploratory rummaging. To help prove that, Tara Olson, an investigator with the County Public Defender's Office, went over what she's found so far. Some of the files she's cataloged include Google Drive and iCloud data, PDFs, and around 20 screenshots of patients' private medical details. The state called a witness of their own, RPD's detective, Brock Newman, who was part of the team that conducted the search. Newman argued that using the software tools he had available, it wouldn't have been possible to pull data or analyze selectively. He testified that doing so would have limited the scope of the search and hindered the investigation.
And because, of course, it's the legal system and things just tend to take forever, it feels like no decision was actually made. In fact, the defense then had the chance to file several more arguments, which came to light on March 10th.
The defense attorneys for the former Mayo Clinic doctor accused of poisoning his wife making a big push to get some of the evidence dismissed from an impending trial.
Connor Bowman is charged with first-degree murder for his wife Betty Bowman's death in August 2023. KGTC's Olivia Pronzinski joins us live in the studio tonight. Olivia, in looking through these lengthy court documents, why do the defense attorneys believe some evidence should be thrown out?
Yeah, Brock and Caitlin, there are 2 main arguments in the court filings. First, that some warrants fail to sufficiently identify items that need to be seized, which is a constitutional requirement. And second, investigators seized large amounts of private health information, violating medical privilege. There were 3 briefs filed, making their arguments to the judge. The first document challenges some of the warrants failed to meet a standard, meaning the warrants were overbroad and lacked specificity. The defense attorneys arguing investigators were rummaging through electronic devices. The documents allege some seized items might include First Amendment material. The defense team giving an example that authorities seized documents referencing death and/or research involving substances that can result in death inside the home of a practicing physician. The second court filing alleges some searches violated medical privilege, noting the Bowmans were both medical professionals and Connor worked also remotely for poison control. Again, the defense arguing the warrants failed to be specific and limitations resulted in the seizure of vast digital data spanning years, if not decades. The final court document continues the argument that medical privilege was violated. According to the brief, large amounts of private health information was collected, which Connor's defense team argues that data is protected by doctor-patient privilege. The defense team goes on to add that the innocent third parties are protected from unreasonable searches, and this type of information requires the highest level of reasonableness to access. The attorneys say those searches were unreasonable.
And as of the day that I'm recording this, which is April 11th, the judge still hasn't made a decision. I was hoping that a decision would come in early April, but I haven't seen anything pop up yet. I even checked right before recording and nothing yet. Although if something does come up between the date that I record this and the date that it goes up, I will, of course, pin a comment or put something in the description box or show notes, something like that to let you guys know. The process of getting justice can be so lengthy, so frustrating, and just so emotionally draining for those involved. And so I really, just feel bad for Betty's loved ones at this point that they have to go through this whole process and wait for everything on top of all of the grief they're dealing with. I do really believe that there's tons of very solid evidence here. So I think it's very possible that justice is right on the horizon for Betty. And I personally feel confident in that. Of course, you never really know. But at this point, I think it's just important that we try to show Betty's family, her friends and loved ones as much support as we possibly can. And you guys always do an amazing job of that in the comments or, reaching out to them in other ways. And I know that really goes a long way to feel like you're not alone in the fight, because the fight for justice can really feel lonely. Also, if you're interested in showing them some extra support, they do have a GoFundMe, and it was set up by her friend Sarah, who I've mentioned in this episode, and 100% of the donations will be given directly to Betty's mom, Nancy.
They're raising money for all the expenses they're having to take on as a result of her death.
And guys, they're really, really close to reaching their goal. It's possible they're already there by the time that you open it. But if they haven't yet reached that number, I would love if we could give them that final push. When I'm recording this, I believe there's only $1,300 left until they hit $15,000. So if you even have $1, it makes a huge difference. My team and I will also be reaching out to them to see if they're interested in getting a Hope grant from my foundation, Higher Hope, because there's just really no reason they should have to take on these costs alone. They should never had to have been in this situation in the first place, and any support that we can offer, we are happy to do so. This case is just heartbreaking on so many levels. Betty was so young and had so much life ahead of her, so many opportunities to affect people's lives in a positive way, and now she doesn't have the chance to do that because Connor is such a selfish, miserable, evil person, in my opinion. She truly deserves so much better than what happened to her, and hopefully I'll be able to update you guys soon that she finally got justice. And I'm sure some of you are curious out there, and so I did want to give you an update on Sir Crumpet II. He is just such a cute boy, and the update is he's doing just fine. I was very happy to hear that. He is in the care of Betty's family, and he's being spoiled by all of her loved ones. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing justice for Betty. Like I said, you never really know, but I feel really confident that really is, going to be coming soon. And I hope that provides some type of relief in some way to her family and her friends. She was loved by so many people, and I look forward to hopefully connecting with them, and hopefully we can help in some way. I know that nothing can bring her back, no justice, no amount of financial support, but, hopefully that will make a difference at least and kind of ease some of the stress. That is unfortunately all I have for you at this point on Betty's case, but I definitely want to hear your thoughts. So let me know in the comments below. And of course, I'll be back next week to discuss another case. But until then, stay safe out there, guys. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of True Crime with Kendall Ray. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me today. I truly, truly appreciate it. I know there is a lot of content out there on the internet these days, and I really appreciate you taking the time to spend some time with me. And for any of you who are new to my show, welcome. Also, so happy to have you. And if you're interested in sticking around, make sure to click subscribe so that you never miss an upload from me. So today, guys, the case that I am going to be talking about is one that is very, very, very difficult to talk about. It's also been highly requested by so many of you. And as soon as I started learning the details, as hard as I knew it was going to be to talk about, I knew we absolutely needed to. We are going to be talking about Emily Pike, who was murdered at just 14 years old, just a child, just a baby, really. And she was brutally and senselessly killed after she snuck out of a group home. And I mean, the story and everything surrounding it and the aftermath of it all is just so upsetting, but more people need to hear her story. She is one of the many Indigenous people whose life has been stolen, and her case really highlights the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls that plagues this country. It's beyond inhumane what this little girl went through, and there not only needs to be justice, but truly there needs to be a major change in how the system handles cases of all missing and murdered Indigenous people, which is something that we have talked about on this show countless times. I have been happy to see that Emily has gotten some coverage in really just the true crime podcast and creator community, which is awesome, and also in some local news station. It's all fantastic, but she really needs national media attention. The monster who killed this beautiful child should not be able to escape her face and name. They should just be absolutely bombarded with what they did every single day and have to suffer with knowing what and who they stole from this world. Before I get into Emily's case, I do have an exciting announcement. I believe I mentioned this last week, but in case you missed last episode, I did want to bring it up again. I wanted to let you know that all Mile Higher Media shows, our merch is now all in one place, which is something that we have been trying to work on for quite some time. I know there have been so many people complaining about, I want to get merch from multiple Mile Higher Media shows, but the shipping, you'd have to pay for shipping for all those different shows, which is totally understandably annoying. We finally fixed this issue, so everything is available at milehighermerch.com. But what's really great and what I'm really excited to announce is that 100% of the proceeds from merch for all shows, so every single piece of merch on our website, is now directly going to my foundation, Higher Hope, and will support victims of violent crime and their families, as well as like-minded organizations that are, doing the same thing that we are. So if you're interested in supporting Higher Hope, we could use all the support we could get so that we can help as many people as we can. And that is all available at milehighermerch.com. So check it out, see if there's anything you're interested in. Maybe you want to get something for a friend even, or Mother's Day, Father's Day is coming up. I don't know, but we would love your support, and it's an easy way to do that while also treating yourself to something nice. Her friends and tribe are desperately seeking attention on this. And if you guys want to help, you can do so just by sharing her story, whether that's word of mouth or on social media. We cannot stop talking about Emily. So with that, let me tell you about what we know so far, which I will warn you, this is pretty early on in this case. There is still a lot that we don't know. But I just wanted to tell you what we do know for those of you who haven't already been following her case. So let's start out by just talking about Emily and who she was. Emily Carla Pike was born on May 16th, 2010 into the San Carlos Apache tribe. And she was born on the San Carlos Apache Reservation located in southeast Arizona. Her mom, Steph, has been as vocal as possible in the midst of all of this. But considering how recently her daughter's life was taken, there's a lot, like I said, that we don't know yet. But what I can tell you about Emily, though, is that she was such a sweet and special little girl. People remember her as having a joyful spirit as well as a loving and kind of quirky personality, and I'm always drawn to the quirky among us. She also had a major love of K-pop and also playing the game Roblox. Emily loved all things sparkly. She loved pink, which is why I set the background colors to pink today for her. And she also loved cats, so I hope that she would like my cat. And she told everyone that she actually wanted to be a vet when she grew up. Emily was also super artistic, and I read that she was interested in maybe pursuing art as well. All of which she should have had the opportunity to do. But at just 14 years old, any hope for her future and accomplishing her aspirations, goals, and dreams was just taken from her. And it makes me sick to know what this poor child went through at the end of her life. You're going to hear me explain the circumstances of how her life ended here in a minute, but I just want to right off the bat remind you guys, which I almost feel I don't need to because my audience is so awesome, but just for, the people that will say things, I just wanted to remind everyone that she did not and could not have known better. So I just ask that you keep any of that commentary to yourself because it's not helpful to anyone. But with all that being said, let's talk about what happened. So leading up to Emily's murder, she actually wasn't living on the reservation. Instead, she was living in a group home in Mesa, Arizona, which is about 120 miles west. A lot of people I've seen covering this case have chosen not to name the home to protect the kids who are still living there, which I think is a great decision. I definitely want to follow suit, but just know that she had been living in a group home. As for why she was there, that's one of the many things that we don't have a lot of insight on, but we do know that she was placed there by tribal social services. And we also know that she was likely placed there because she was struggling with her mental health and they had better resources for her than if she were on the reservation. Now, there is a group home on the reservation. However, due to the high demand for child placement and limited staffing and space, it doesn't sound like there was even room for Emily there. And one thing that I want to clarify right away here is that the home that she was in does work with the Department of Child Services, or DCS, to place kids, but Emily wasn't in the care of DCS. She was in the care of, like I said, tribal social services, and that distinction does matter. And also, which I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about her family and her home life, and that's another area where we just don't have a lot of clarification or answers. I can tell you, though, that Emily was surrounded by a community who loved her, including her parents, her grandmother, her aunts and uncles, as well as her cousins. Her father was in prison at the time of her death for criminal damage. And again, there's not a lot of information here on that, but his incarceration didn't impact the love that he had for Emily as far as what's been reported. I will say I especially loved learning about her relationship with her cousins. She was very, very close with her cousins, some of them. And I think the cousin bond can be very, very special. I am personally best friends with my cousin, and two of her cousins were around the same age as her, and they called themselves the trio, and they were basically inseparable. And even while Emily was away, they would talk to her on the phone, and they would make plans for when they could finally see each other again. They were just a huge part of each other's lives, which just breaks my heart thinking that they no longer have her, and it shouldn't be that way. They even spoke just a few weeks before what happened, and they remember her saying that she was going to be home within a month, which I guess they were excited about because they were making plans to go shopping when she came home. But this was a little confusing because it hasn't been reported if this was a legitimate plan that they had or if this was something that Emily was independently hoping would happen. Some people think it was the latter, though, especially given what happened on January 27th, 2025, very, very recently. That day at 8:19 p.m., the group's home manager made a call to the Mesa Police Department to report that Emily was AWOL, which if you haven't heard that term, the Oxford Dictionary defines it as absent without official leave, but without intent to desert, or absent from where one should be, missing. I guess there was a local church group that had come to the group home, which sort of created a distraction, and she was able to slip out of her bedroom window. And according to reports, she was last seen walking near the intersection of Mesa Drive and McKellips Road at around 7:45 p.m. But after that, Emily was never seen or heard from again. And this wasn't very far from the home, so it's believed that whoever took her did so not long after she left. And what we also don't know yet is if she knew this person or not. The group home doesn't allow cell phones, so I'm not sure if there's any type of digital trail or not. And let me just say, the saga, I should say, of how her disappearance was handled is going to piss you off, or at least it should. And that started with what we see in so many cases of missing children and teenagers who are failed by the system. And that's because the missing persons report, when it was taken, she was considered a runaway teen, which isn't entirely untrue. The problem, though, and again, something we see a lot, is they used Emily's history of running away as an excuse to not take this seriously. Now, Emily's full history of how long she was in the group home actually hasn't been released, but we know that she had lived there 2 separate times. And in 2023, she ran away from the home on 3 different occasions. And on one of those occasions, Emily actually ran away with another child from the home. And this is really sad, but every time that Emily ran away and was found by the police, she made it clear that she really did not want to go back there. In September, she and that other child who she ran away with told the Mesa police, quote, they did not want to go back to the group home because they make them work by scrubbing walls, baseboards, window seals, and even getting on their hands and knees to scrub the grout on the tile. Now, one of them, and we're not exactly sure who, actually said that she would rather go to jail or live with her grandma than return back to the group home. And then in another September runaway incident, Emily told the officers that she didn't want to go back, quote, because it makes her uncomfortable when the staff gets into arguments with other juveniles in the home. And this is, of course, I think, in my opinion, one of those things that you could never truly understand what it's like unless you have lived in a situation like this. And of course, I can't say that I understand how Emily felt because I've never lived in a group home. And when I was researching this case and, reading comments on other videos and just things on Reddit and forums, I read a lot of stories of people who have lived in these homes. And according to so many of them, these types of things seem to be very common. Some, if not a lot, or the majority of these kids are probably scared and confused and potentially not treated well. And all they really want is to be able to go back home. Obviously, there are probably some group homes that are excellent and that kids do have a good experience in. But I'm telling you from just what I have read from other people's experiences, this seems to be what the majority of them are saying. And I'd love to hear from any of you out there who have experienced living in a group home and what it was like for you personally. But it really seems that a lot of them want to get out of these group homes because they either don't feel safe or don't feel comfortable. And again, I want to be really clear here that not all group homes are bad or create that kind of environment, but some of them definitely are. And from what we just heard, it sounds like Emily wasn't happy and really, really did not want to be there. And a lot of people have questioned whether the home that she was staying in was doing a good job of protecting kids. It's been reported that in the last 3 years, the Mesa police have responded to over 80 calls from that home specifically, 42 of which were for missing persons. And of those 42 calls, 30 resulted in missing persons reports being filed. Now, I don't want to downplay this at all, but I do feel it's important that I explain it a little bit further because I've seen a lot of coverage on this, especially in early reporting, where people say things like, wow, this group home has had 30 kids run away in just 3 years, which of course it does kind of sound like that. But that was 30 reports for 18 kids. And that is a horrible number still. I mean, 18 kids is too many. 1 kid is too many. But I think it's really important when it comes to these cases that we stick to the facts as much as possible. But yeah, to clear some of the confusion in this case up, it was 30 runaway instances for 18 kids. So basically, if a child ran away twice, that is counted as 2 of the reports. I just wanted to explain that a little further because I think especially in the true crime space, it's so important that we stick to the facts, and saying things like that just perpetuates misinformation. But still, that doesn't change how I feel about this group home and about other group homes I've learned about. I mean, I definitely question this specific group home's ability to protect children who stay there. And even though 18 of those runaways were found, 2 of them were not. One of them, of course, being Emily, but there's also another young girl named Veronica Cruz. Now, she disappeared from this group home in March of 2024, and she has yet to be found. And that alone should have been an indication that there needed to be change. But instead, Emily was able to slip out of her window, where she was quickly met with what can only be described as horror. So in the state of Arizona, it is the law that when a child in state custody goes missing, they need to notify the authorities within 1 day. But since Emily was under the care of tribal social services, that law actually didn't apply. Now, we know that the group home made the report that night and that the Mesa police did report her as missing to the National Crime Information Center that night as well. But nobody, not even the police, thought to notify Emily's family. This is absolutely maddening, but it took a full week before her mom got a call from her daughter's case manager that her daughter was missing. I'm sorry, but you can't tell me the police were trying that hard to find her if they didn't go to her mother first. It just makes no sense. And listen to this. Mesa police said that it wasn't their responsibility to notify her family. Yes, they actually said that. Instead, they said that the group home should have told her case manager, who then should have told her family. And honestly, I don't care what the protocol is. It's all just ridiculous and makes no sense. But at the end of the day, you tell the family if their child is missing. But they didn't. They waited a week. And so tons of precious time was wasted. Her family could have spent time getting the word out or going around, putting out flyers, talking to people they knew, just looking for her. But instead, they had no idea that she was gone. The police did start to circulate flyers as well as canvass the immediate area, but apparently, since they categorized her as a runaway, she didn't meet the requirements of an Amber Alert, which I have also covered cases on all of our shows where this happens. I will never understand. It makes no sense to me. It is so frustrating. And the vibe I really get here, and again, this is just my opinion, is it seems that everyone thought that since she ran away, that she would just be coming back. And so they didn't think or care to look any harder, even though there's a 14-year-old child out there on her own who knows where and who knows in whose hands, which is just wrong on so many levels, but especially when you consider the fact that Indigenous women and girls are murdered and go missing at a disproportionately higher rate than other people. And the state of Arizona is actually ranked 3rd for the largest number of MMIWG cases, behind New Mexico and Washington. The data literally proves that Emily was a high-risk individual, and yet she was not treated that way even remotely. And I don't care what her history was, and I don't care if she chose to run away. It honestly doesn't matter at all. She did not deserve to be killed, and the fact that this wasn't a high priority from the start is why so many people are calling for change and have been for so long, which unfortunately brings me to the hardest part to talk about in this case, which is finding Emily's body. Very recently, on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2025, officers with the Gila County Sheriff's Office were notified by civilians about suspicious trash bags in a remote area just off of the highway. And when officers arrived, they discovered multiple contractor trash bags which contained dismembered human remains. The remains were located in a very remote area off of Highway 60 near mile marker 277 and Forest Service Road 355, just outside of Globe, Arizona. And based on where she was left, it seems as though someone had pulled into this service road to toss her body before making their escape in an unknown direction. Now, Highway 60 can take you all the way from Arizona to Virginia, and in context of where Emily was last seen, her dump site was 100 miles to the east. And it was also in the direction of her reservation, which has led many people to believe that maybe that's where she was trying to go. Like maybe she was hitchhiking or something. That could be a possibility here. And this just makes me sick to think about. But do you want to know how her family and everyone else found out about this? Through a leaked memo on Facebook. Yep, you heard that right. Someone in law enforcement accidentally posted an internal memo to the sheriff's office Facebook page. And I can't even begin to understand how someone would make a mistake of this magnitude. It is beyond strange to me. It's so negligent. It almost feels, and this is just my opinion, it almost feels like purposeful, but at the same time, I'm like, why would anyone do that? But how could you be dumb enough to make a mistake like that? It's just so, I cannot understand it. And it was horrible. It was horrible because it contained graphic descriptions of what had been found. Also, I just wanted to quickly note that this memo is very graphic. What I'm about to say is very graphic, very upsetting. So that's your warning to skip forward or to just close out now. But I hope that you'll stay, even though it's difficult to hear, because Emily's story really needs to be heard. This memo shared that an unidentified female was found dismembered in contractor trash bags, and that a head and a torso were found in one bag, and that legs were found in another. It was mentioned that her head and face showed visible signs of trauma, and to this day, her arms and hands have never been found. And I know that that information is brutal to hear, extremely terrifying, and I mean, there aren't even words for it. It is so horrific, but I think it's important that we share what exactly happened to her, what this child went through probably at the end of her life. Now, they didn't name Emily directly in this leaked Facebook memo. Absurd. I don't even have words for it. It's so wild. But it was pretty clear that she was who they were talking about. And get this, guys, they even included photos of the crime scene in this post, including the trash bags that she was found in. Can you even imagine what that would be like for anyone to see, let alone her own family and loved ones, her friends? It is horrific beyond words. It is such a massively disgusting mistake that oh my God, it makes me so angry that this could ever have happened. Not to mention that anyone could have seen that post and then gone to the crime scene, gone to the spot where it happened, and possibly destroyed evidence, especially since it was so early on. I mean, it is just such a massive fuck up. And I'm sorry for my language there. Another word just doesn't seem to cover how messed up this situation is. And to say that this was careless feels like an understatement, but all of this just truly speaks to how cases with Indigenous people, Indigenous victims are handled. So to say that this absolutely outraged their community would be an understatement. I mean, they are so angry beyond words, as they should be. And what makes it even worse is there hasn't even been an apology. Just a follow-up memo that came out on February 26th, which didn't do a whole lot of explaining at all. It reads in part, on February 14th, 2025, the remains of an unidentified female were found. The Gila County Sheriff's Office, in conjunction with the San Carlos Apache Tribal Police, began an investigation. Due to the circumstances, it was decided that further information was needed before any public notification. There was no indication that there was an active threat to the community. Unfortunately, the information on Facebook was intended only for law enforcement agencies and was leaked. GCSO detectives are currently working long hours to make positive identification and find any information and evidence. I do get that this was an official statement, but it is shocking how little sympathy or responsibility there was. I mean, there was really no accountability at all, no real recognition of what a massive mistake this was, and really no apology whatsoever or any attempt at anything close to that. And also, I don't know if you caught this, but they said that there's no active threat. And that just pissed off everyone, the whole community, because to suggest that there's no active threat, it makes no sense. That has been so upsetting to so many people to hear. I think we can all agree that someone who is willing to kidnap and then dismember a 14-year-old girl has either done this before or is sick enough in the head to do it again. Even if they are trying to say that this is an isolated incident, and even if it is, I understand why people are scared and angry. And the next day, everything that people in the community and her loved ones were fearing came true, because the sheriff's office confirmed that these remains did in fact belong to Emily Pike. This confirmation came through both dental records and a DNA sample submitted by her mom.
The remains of a 14-year-old girl were recently found in a wooded area outside of Globe. The teen had been missing after she walked away from a group home. 12 News journalist Sean Rice is joining us where those remains were found with some new emerging details on her death. Sean?
How did 14-year-old Emily Pike disappear from a Mesa group home and 2 weeks later have her remains found right here where I'm standing off Forest Road 355 around 20 miles northeast of the town of Globe? That's a question the Gila County Sheriff's Office and the San Carlos Apache Police Department are desperately trying to answer. January 27th, 2025. That's the date Mesa police say young Emily Pike walked away from a Mesa group home in the area of Mesa Drive and McKellips. For over 2 weeks, she was considered a missing person or a runaway teen. Then on February 14th, parts of Emily's remains were found here in a desolate area off of Highway 60 northeast of Globe. For over a week and a half, the community had no idea that Pike's remains had been found until the Gila County Sheriff's Office accidentally leaked more details on Facebook that were only meant for other law enforcement agencies. In that post, they revealed that Emily's head and torso were found in black trash bags, and her arms and hands were still missing. During this time, the case still being investigated as a homicide, but the sheriff's office and other agencies were intending to keep this information close to the vest for the sake of that investigation.
And not long after this information started coming out, Emily's mom did end up saying a few things publicly, and understandably, it's been hard for her to say a lot given the anguish that she is probably dealing with right now, but she did share how difficult all of this has been for her. Steph also said that she just doesn't understand why this happened, why her daughter, an innocent child, had to be killed. She said that it's going to be especially hard when Emily's 15th birthday comes around. However, she wants to make sure to celebrate her this year and every year that follows. My heart truly breaks for her mother. I mean, Emily was her baby, and now she's gone. And she doesn't have any understanding as to what happened or why. And I would really like to believe that something is being done about it. I'm hopeful that it is. I mean, trying to be. But a lot of it seems to be being kept very close to the vest at this point. Steph has said that she has been told that they have 3 suspects that they're looking into, which you would think sounds promising, but the sheriff's office has actually stated that they have no suspects or even persons of interest at this point. And all they've said that they have is a few leads that they are following up on. And I don't know what that means. Oh, and just for clarification, it's the Gila County Sheriff's Office who is taking the lead since that's where Emily was found. But what's difficult is we don't actually know where Emily was killed. We know where she was last seen and we know where she was found, but we're missing a crucial piece of this puzzle. And so obviously finding this third location is crucial because it could help explain what happened to her. And the contractor bags that she was found in are also going to be very critical. I can imagine, and I hope that they're being tested for DNA and fingerprints, but the type of bags that these were could also speak to the person who did it, potentially. I don't know, maybe it could give us insight on their occupation potentially, or could help figure out where they were purchased. I mean, any insight at this point would be good insight, right? And hell, right now, we don't even know what her cause of death was. And a lot of people have questioned why her hands haven't been found. And if you are really into true crime in general, follow a lot of cases, or potentially work in law enforcement or something similar, you may understand there are several reasons why someone wouldn't want the hands of their victim to be found. But it's a very interesting point that people have brought up, because one of the potential reasons for this is, could Emily have fought her attacker? Is it possible that she may have gotten some of their DNA under her fingernails? So it's possible that they were hidden in a more concealed location. Because when you think about it, whoever did this dumped Emily in a remote location, but they didn't conceal her that well. I truly hate talking about cases where people were dismembered. I think it is so disturbing. But one thing I have learned over the years is that sometimes killers will conceal certain body parts, specifically the hands being one of them, in a different location and try to make them harder to find to avoid the victim from being identified. It's possible that they were hoping that if her remains were found, they wouldn't be able to figure out who she was, or maybe they just didn't want her to be found at all. I'm sure that was a goal as well, but there's something to be said about how and where she was found. I hope that all of those details are being considered. I'm sure they are. The FBI, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the San Carlos Apache Tribal Police have stepped in to help support this investigation. I'm really, really glad to hear that. I hope they can really work together to get this beautiful little girl justice. And I will say, it does give me some hope that this many organizations have started coming together for Emily. Emily's case has sparked a major flame when it comes to discussing the disappearances and murders of Indigenous people. And on one hand, it's good to see that happening more and more over the years, but it's horrible that things like this have to happen for people to talk about it. A 14-year-old shouldn't have to be found in trash bags for people to care about the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous people. And quite frankly, the conversations that are being had, as great as they are, aren't enough. I mean, even me covering this case isn't enough. And I've seen a lot of support from the true crime community on Emily's case specifically, which is incredible to see. I feel like there has been so much growth in the true crime space over the years, and I'm so thrilled to see that. And like I said, the local news media has picked this up to some degree as well, and that's great. But like I also said earlier, there has been zero national coverage, and her case absolutely deserves that, absolutely needs that, and it hasn't happened yet. And why it hasn't been picked up by the national media really just speaks to the problem, right? I mean, Indigenous people are largely viewed as invisible to our society, and that's not just my opinion, that's a fact. And understanding Native American history, particularly the oppression and marginalization, is something that we all need to take the time to educate ourselves about. And if you already have taken the time to educate yourself about it more and try to educate others. Because choosing not to learn and recognize this history is frankly just choosing to ignore and isolate a group of people who deserve the same respect and attention as anyone else. And maybe if there's more conversation and better education, more awareness, maybe some of these horrifying statistics can be improved. A 2016 study by the National Institute of Justice found that 84% of American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime, including 56% who have experienced sexual violence. According to the Indian Health Service, an average of 40% of women involved in sex trafficking are identified as American Indian and Alaska Native. And get this, homicide is the third leading cause of death for Native girls aged 15 to 19 and women aged 20 to 24. Really let that one sink in. It's the third leading cause of death. And not to mention, and again, let this one really sink in, the murder rates for Native women are more than 10 times the national average. Okay? This is a crisis, to say the least, and it disproportionately affects Indigenous communities, especially women and girls. And with the lack of coverage on these cases, there is little to no accountability. This epidemic has been swept under the rug countless times for so long, and it just can't keep happening. It makes no sense. And thankfully, Emily's case is getting some traction, but it can't be for nothing. Now, there have been endless marches and vigils since the news of Emily's murder broke, which really aimed to highlight these very issues. Just a day after they announced that the remains were Emily's, the San Carlos Apache tribe rallied together to raise awareness, and it's really because of their effort that we know about what happened. And the photos from these rallies, guys, they have been so incredibly powerful. And if you're just listening to this episode, I really want to encourage you to look some of these photos up. They're just so impactful. And, you know, the saying, a picture says 1,000 words, I think
heavily applies here. It's just so important that you see them for yourself to understand the impact and the pain that these communities are experiencing constantly. And these vigils and rallies for Emily were happening very frequently. Just recently, on March 4th, there was a vigil held near Mesa Drive and McKellips Road, where Emily was last seen, and there was well over 100 people there to show their support. And it wasn't only her tribe, but tribes from all over the valley came to Mesa as well.
It's a song for those who mourn.
This is not just a simple little story. This is a 14-year-old girl. The way she died is not okay. Our communities here are hurting.
Native Americans from all over the valley in Mesa to remember 14-year-old Emily Pike, who went missing late in January and found dead on February 14th off Highway 60 northeast of Globe. Authorities found her body dismembered. They're investigating it as murder. Pike's aunt, remembering the joy she was.
Emily was artistic, she was kind, she was funny, her grandma explained to her that she was quirky, she was always, laughing.
Pike was part of the San Carlos Apache tribe, her death highlighting a troubling trend. Native American women go missing and are murdered at a much higher rate than those of other populations. It's why passions run high.
And police have shut down the intersection as supporters of Emily and her family take to the streets to call for justice and to remember her name.
They should be aware that this is real. We don't always have all the resources we need to help solve these cases.
Emily's aunt said that her niece sparked the world, which is now on fire because of her. And that was just so powerful to me. Her case is continuing to ignite long overdue change, and it's about damn time. And very quickly, a memorial was created on the corner of the intersection where Emily disappeared from, making it so that people not only have a place to memorialize her, but so that people can't ignore what happened. And the next day, there was another vigil in Mesa where hundreds more took to the streets shouting, "Say her name," demanding that justice be served. Dozens of posters could be seen with Emily's name on them, both advocating for justice and for the reform that needs to take place in order to prevent this from happening again. And the spokesperson for Emily's family said that seeing these large crowds really, truly touched their hearts because it gave them comfort and strength in a time where they needed it most. And these large crowds have really come out full force, and they have kept it up for a while. On March 10th, there was a, quote, day of action held at the Arizona State Capitol to call for justice, where more than 100 people marched with the goal of urging lawmakers to make changes when it comes to the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous people. And listen to this. A 2016 Urban Indian Health Report showed that out of 5,712 cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, only 116 were logged into the Department of Justice database. And I want to say those numbers again so that it really sinks in, because I don't think a lot of people truly understand how bad this epidemic has actually gotten. Okay, so 5,712 cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and only 116 of those, 116 out of 5,712 have actually been logged into the Department of Justice's database. Doesn't that make you just want to bash your head on the wall? It blows my mind. And it's not like people are just calling for action without a solution. They have a solution, or at least a plan of something that can start to solve this problem. For example, House Bill 2281 aims to establish an Amber Alert style system specifically for missing Indigenous people. And it would operate just like Amber and Silver Alerts and would ensure that Indigenous individuals receive the same priority when it comes to notifying the public. The bill was actually introduced in January of 2025 before Emily even went missing, but in the aftermath of her murder, the push to get it approved has really been expedited.
At 4 o'clock today, Lucha will have activists out here in front of the state capitol rallying in honor of Emily and other missing and murdered Indigenous girls and women. This comes as a piece of legislation is moving through the legislature that would add an Amber Alert style system for the Indigenous community. Now, this legislation started actually before Emily went missing, but recently just passed the House unanimously and is on its way to the Senate, where it will be heard in a public safety committee on Wednesday. The sponsor of this bill says this legislation would create systematic change for the Indigenous community.
And we don't have the appropriate data, the jurisdiction, and the resources to address when Indigenous people go missing. And so this bill helps not address it completely, but starts ticking away at the main issue.
And I'm happy to say there actually has been a positive movement with this bill. In February, it actually passed unanimously in the House. And then in March, it passed unanimously by the Senate Public Safety Committee. So now it's going to be heard by the Senate. And if it passes there, it's going to go to Governor Katie Hobbs, where she can either sign it into law or veto it. And hopefully, with how things are trending, I really, really hope and I expect that she will sign it into law. Because if she doesn't, in my mind, she is just a terrible person, and I wouldn't be able to understand why anyone wouldn't sign it into law. It just makes sense, right? But I feel confident that she will. I really, really hope she will. And then another really big issue that needs to be addressed is the lack of communication between different law enforcement agencies. Because when tribal police don't communicate with local and federal authorities and vice versa, that's where serious problems occur. The Not Invisible Act of 2019 was signed into law, and it aimed at improving the coordination among these agencies to combat violence against the Indigenous. It also established a commission to help make recommendations for improving teamwork and finding the best ways to support survivors and families of victims as it relates to the MMIP epidemic. And then there are other bills as well, like the Arizona House Bill 2479, that have been passed to help when it comes to the mandated reporting of missing or runaway children. And of course, all of this is great, but the problems aren't solved yet. And like anything, it does take time for these systems and laws to truly work. And really, it's going to be up to all of us to make sure that the pressure doesn't go away. Okay, we've got to keep the momentum going. And just because these laws are being signed doesn't mean that we can ignore what's happening or pretend like it's getting better. But getting back to Emily's case, I wanted to talk about Emily's grandmother, Agatha. And she has also spoken out about the pain that this has caused for their family and that she and her granddaughter were incredibly close.
Agatha Key is Emily's biological grandmother.
Crying a lot.
She says Emily was always a nice, sweet, quiet girl that got good grades.
I miss her. Hard for me. Imagine what happened to her.
Her death is now being investigated as a homicide by the Gila County Sheriff's Office and the San Carlos Apache Tribal Police. And so far, no arrests have been made.
And the fact that no arrests have been made yet is really frustrating because I get that she was found in a remote location, but where she was abducted was a busy street. And law enforcement has said that they have found surveillance footage of Emily walking in the area. So, of course, I understand that they can't release everything. And I guess we just have to hope that they were able to capture someone picking her up, or at least someone near her, or someone in the area that they are considering a person of interest, or that they have a lead on something. It seems that they are really focusing on tips from the public to help get Emily justice, and they have even created an online tip portal where people can submit any information they have. And of course, I'm going to link that below in the description of this episode and the show notes if you are listening on a podcast platform. Now, another big update did come out more recently in mid-March. That's when DCS announced that they were opening a licensing inquiry into the group home where Emily had been staying. However, a spokesperson from the department did say that they don't believe any action the group home took caused what happened to Emily. And coincidentally, or maybe not, just a day after this was announced, someone from the group home finally decided to speak out. And I'll link the article for you guys with all of the questions that they were asked and answered. But to summarize it, there was a lot of skirting around the issue, in my opinion. One thing that was very strange, in my opinion, was when this person was asked why the staff doesn't go out and look for kids when they run away. And the answer was basically that they're a hands-off facility. Like, they don't physically touch the kids if they run away. And okay, but that's not what's being asked here. They want to know why they didn't go out and look. We all want to know why they didn't go out and look, not why they don't touch the kids. It was just a super weird answer, in my opinion. Oh, and speaking of the group home, Emily's roommate actually spoke out and had some very interesting things to say as well. Now, it is a little unclear if she was her current roommate or if she lived there previously and got this information from another girl, but she said that Emily used the church group as a distraction to slip out and see a boy that she met while taking guitar lessons. And I'm sure you guys want to know more about this, and believe me, so do I. I would love to know who this is or if this has been looked into more. We don't really have anything more than that. I would assume, I really do think that it's got to be something that the police are actively looking into. And the roommate was also the one to share that Emily was in the home because of her struggles with mental health, because they supposedly had better resources for her.
The tragic story of Emily Pike, seen by millions.
I wanted to say that I miss you so much.
After the 14-year-old's dismembered body was found in eastern Arizona on Valentine's Day, her remains stuffed into trash bags. But the story hits hardest for those who lived with Emily in the Mesa group home, like her roommate, who we're calling Chelsea to protect her identity.
My relationship with Emily was just like trying to steer her in the right direction because it's hard being in the group home.
Chelsea says she lived at the group home near Mesa Drive in McKellips for 4 years and that Emily lived there 2 different times. Emily was from the San Carlos Apache Reservation, and Chelsea says she struggled with mental health and there were better resources in the valley. While Chelsea recently moved out, she's in contact with many of the girls still living there. She says Emily left the home in late January because she wanted to visit a boy she met while taking guitar lessons. Chelsea says at the time Emily left, a church group was conducting activities at the group home.
What it looked like was that the church was there and that served as a distraction of when Emily left. She left because she wanted to go out and see the boy that she liked. And she wanted to talk to him. She either used the back door or she used the window, and she left as everyone was distracted.
Based on where Emily's remains were found off Highway 60 heading northeast, Chelsea believes she was just trying to go home.
I feel like she just ran away and she was trying to hitchhike back to her reservation to see her parents. And she just got picked up by the wrong person.
And something that I keep just coming back to is, of course, it may not have been the group home's responsibility to keep an eye on Emily 24/7 necessarily, but it is definitely their job to keep her safe. And again, in my opinion, I don't believe they did that. I know that they reported her missing as soon as they realized that she was gone, but the whole thing just feels very negligent to me. And just as with law enforcement, they should have contacted her family right away. And they didn't, which just wasted precious time. Emily's uncle, Allred Pike Jr., has been a voice for justice in her case, and he has really emphasized the pain that this has caused, especially because Emily's dad is in jail. He says that's been one of the hardest parts. He believes if her case had been paid more attention to in the beginning, or maybe if she wasn't treated only as a runaway, we might already have answers by now. And that is really just a sad fact of this case, is that Emily had a history of running away, and because of that, they decided to assume that that's what happened and that she was going to come back. Now, there is a task force that was put together for her case, but that wasn't even put together until 3 weeks after her remains were identified. So why did it take them so long to do that? Also, I wanted to note that the San Carlos Tribal Council is offering a $75,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the person responsible, and I hope that's enough to get someone talking. The tribe is also doing an independent study to review their internal processes to determine where improvements can be made, and I'm very happy to see that. They also want to find ways to improve the group home standards off the reservation so something like this doesn't happen again. Specifically, they're requesting that state leaders investigate and tighten regulation for state licensed residential groups. And here's a quote on this. This investigation should carefully review the safety, security, monitoring, licensing, and operational standards for group homes and determine how these could be strengthened to prevent children from leaving their care without permission. We ask that your recommendations be presented to the legislature to be considered in appropriate legislation that is named in honor of Emily Pike. There really has been such a beautiful sense of community in all of this, which of course, by no means makes any of this okay, but, there's, I think, some comfort and hope in that. And I wanted to highlight a couple examples. A handful of artists actually came together to paint the most beautiful mural of Emily. And it's not only an incredible depiction of her beauty and her warmth, but it's filled with painted red handprints of people who wanted to honor her and show their support, including her moms. And I'm sure a lot of you know this, but the red handprint is a symbol that's used in the MMIWG movement, which represents the voices of Indigenous women and girls who have been silenced and haven't had their voices heard. Emily may no longer be here, but her story is always going to live on, and that is something that I'm sure of. And seeing how vigils and rallies have been held not only in Arizona, but all around the country shows that she is a uniting force, not just for her own case, but for all missing and murdered Indigenous people. Also, the case of Leo Harry White has gained some attention during all of this, and get this, he is also Native American, and he was found off of Highway 60 and mile marker 277. Just like Emily. I mean, it wasn't the exact same spot, but it was pretty close. And he was found shot to death in a car in 2021. And his case has gone cold. And I'm guessing a lot of you haven't heard of him because it has gotten zero attention. And I mean, I know I hadn't heard of him. And then there's Alexander Esky, another name who has been brought up a lot recently. He went missing in June of 2020, and his family is still desperately seeking answers. Now, more recently in Emily's case, towards the end of March, a 12-page police report was released from the Mesa Police Department. And this gave us more insight into Emily's past and the timeline of her case. And I've already shared what we know about her past, but there are a few things from that I wanted to highlight. Specifically, that on February 11th, the police were notified by an employee of the group home that they received a voicemail from an anonymous caller who claimed that Emily was back home on the reservation with her mom. And what's strange, though, is that this call came in on February 2nd, and they say it wasn't listened to until the 7th, leaving 4 days that they didn't report this. And what reason did they have to hold on to this information? I have no idea. I mean, obviously, it didn't turn out to be true, as confirmed by Emily's mom, but still. We also did learn that Emily was taking some type of medication for what they described as behavioral issues, but I wasn't able to find out any more about this. Obviously, as you can tell, this is one of those cases where there is just so much we still just don't know. There are so many unanswered questions. I really hope, I have to believe that these questions are going to be answered. And the reason I say I believe that is because from what I've seen in her community, nobody is giving up on this little girl, and they will continue to fight until justice is served. Emily was laid to rest at the end of March, where hundreds of people gathered in her memory at the San Carlos High School gym, and a lot of those people were wearing pink. It was a beautiful but deeply emotional celebration of life where they honored Emily through photos and stories, vowing to never give up in the fight for justice. And it was actually a 2-day memorial and wake, and her body had been escorted by a motorcycle group so that they could lay her to rest safely. And I did read that her dad was allowed to attend the wake. However, he was not able to attend the memorial and burial. And again, these pictures they're so powerful. They really capture the emotion of it all and the pain that this community and her loved ones are experiencing. And all I can really say is how badly I'm hoping that justice comes soon, that answers come soon. There have been volunteer-led search efforts to find the rest of Emily's remains, and I know that bringing all of her home is something that everyone wants. Searches have also been conducted by law enforcement, but it sounds like right now they're holding off on doing any more until new information comes in.
I've gone to the location twice.
Twyla Casador has been searching.
A part of her is out there wanting to come home. And a part of her is wanting us to come and find her.
Twyla, who knows the area well, has led small volunteer-based searches for Emily Pike's remains.
For myself as a parent, knowing that we did put in that full effort, and whether her remains be found or not, it brings you a bit of closure.
But she's raising questions on what efforts are being taken by local and federal law enforcement.
We need a crew out there. We need people out there. We need drones out there.
The Gila County Sheriff's Office tells the ABC 15 investigators that they've conducted additional searches in the area with multiple agencies and cadaver dogs. They say that they'll do more searches if there's new information or evidence that would lead them to specific areas.
God has given another beautiful angel.
Hundreds coming out to honor Emily both Friday and Saturday. Services were held to remember the teen.
As a Native American person, as an Apache person, no. She's still out there. We have to go look for her.
Twyla says no one should stop searching. As part of the San Carlos Apache culture, it's important to not stop.
You wouldn't want your child partially there. You don't want anything like this for anybody. And for us as Native Americans, we have a belief system where having all of her there, regardless what the condition is completing her journey.
Twyla plans to continue searches, hoping there will soon be a larger focus and more direction to bring Emily home.
Let's find her. Let's bring her home. Let's bring peace and closure for the family, for the community.
I've been checking daily for updates. I just literally checked right now as I'm recording this, and there's no information as of right now. But if anything comes out, I will pin a comment and put in the description or show notes any new information that comes out. I mentioned earlier that she likely didn't have a cell phone, but I'm wondering if there's any kind of digital trail somewhere. And I've also heard people talking about how she played the game Roblox, which I know a lot of young people play. And I've also, as much as I don't know really anything about Roblox, I've heard that, I've seen a lot actually about how it can be a breeding ground for predators. I know it's an online game, and I'm not sure if she had access to a computer or phone to play it. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure if she even was on Roblox. That's just kind of something people have been talking about. Obviously, your mind can go a million different places when trying to figure out what happened or how she could have ended up in the hands of the wrong person. But at the end of the day, all that really matters is justice. So we need to continue to say her name. We need to continue to spread awareness. And that means sharing any information that you can about Emily's case, whether that's just by word of mouth to people that you know, whether that's posting on your social media or sharing any type of coverage, whether it's my episode, someone else's coverage, a news special, an article, anything like that. Anything that you can do to spread awareness on Emily's case would be deeply appreciated by her loved ones in her community. And as I mentioned earlier, we're in the process of reaching out to Emily's family to see what we can do about getting them a HOPE grant, which I hope can support them. They did have a GoFundMe at one point, but they actually did close it after receiving $27,000 in donations. So if they aren't looking for more financial help, I'm sure we can find a way to raise the reward for information, something like that. I mean, we have various ways that we can help them through the foundation, so I hope that we're able to do so. But again, if you guys want to help out yourself, don't underestimate the power of just spreading awareness. But most importantly, above all else, if you have any information regarding her murder, please contact the Gila County Sheriff's Detective at 928-200-2352, the Bureau of Indian Affairs Special Agent at 505-917-7830, or the San Carlos Apache Tribal Police Detective at 928-475-1755. I so desperately wish I had more to share with you about Emily's case. I know the information is very, very limited, and that makes these cases so frustrating, but they are still very important to talk about. So I really appreciate all of you who stuck through this entire episode, listened to everything that I had to say on this, and really listen to what the community is trying to get people to understand, because we have to see these changes. You know, the deaths of Indigenous people cannot be in vain. There are so many just like Emily that we have to remember, and we have to make these changes, or this is just going to continue to happen. I really want to hear your thoughts on the case, about the epidemic as a whole, you know, especially from those of you who have experienced this yourself. As always, I definitely want to hear from you all as far as your thoughts on the case. I would love to see some positive comments, as you guys always do, for her loved ones in case they come across this coverage, because those comments really go a long way. I know that firsthand from speaking to victims' families who have come on the show. You guys are just so awesome, and I'm so, so grateful for this audience. I truly am. I can't say it enough. I know it's probably annoying how much I say that, but I really, really appreciate you guys, and I'm so proud of this audience that truly, truly cares about justice for all victims. But that is going to be it for me this week. Of course, I will be back next week to talk about another case, but until then, stay safe out there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to True Crime with Kendall Ray. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me. I'm so happy to have you here. And if you are new to the show, then welcome. I'm so happy to have you too. And make sure to click subscribe so you never miss an upload from me. And guys, I just got to say right out the gate here that this episode is going to be really tough to get through. And that's mainly because I'm going to be telling you about a victim who was only 17 years old and just had so much going for her. I mean, she was kind, smart, athletic, artistic. I mean, you name it. She was a stellar human being. Her name is Angelina Gonzalez, and her life was stolen from her in such a brutal, unnecessary, and unimaginable way. Cases like this, when the victim is so young, are especially heart-wrenching. I mean, all murders are, of course, but especially when someone is at the age where they are just getting started in life and have an amazing future ahead of them. And that is all just ripped away in an instant and for literally zero reason. Now, Angelina's case is still very much developing. She was murdered just a couple of days before Christmas of 2024. But normally I will wait a little bit longer to cover a case until there is more information available and we're further along in the process towards justice. But her family has expressed that they're really trying to get her name and her story out there and raise awareness about domestic violence, especially in younger relationships. They have already done an amazing job at trying to keep her legacy alive. And I just want to further that effort. And like I said, Angelina's case really brings up a lot of conversation around domestic violence in today's youth, which is something I know is a big topic right now. I mean, all the time, but I've seen a lot of talk about it recently because of the show Adolescence on Netflix, which is excellent, very scary, but very eye-opening, especially as a parent or to other young people out there as well. So towards the end of the episode, I want to have more of a conversation around that, and I'm going to be sharing some information and resources with you all, which I think you can never do enough. And as I always have to say when we're talking about a case that is still active, everyone that I'm speaking about today is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. My audience, all of you, are always so amazing when it comes to showing families in these situations support in so many different ways. And I just off the bat wanted to share their GoFundMe with you. So if you're interested in showing them your support as well, they do have this GoFundMe. It will be linked in the show notes and in the description of this episode. And I'm also going to be reaching out to them from my foundation to try and offer them a hope grant if they are interested. And of course, as always, I completely understand if you can't make a donation right now. I think just doing something as little as leaving a positive comment for their family, words of encouragement and support just go a long way in case they do end up seeing this episode and see the feedback. Angelina's death has been completely devastating for her family, as you can imagine, and also for her community. And I'm so hopeful that our community can come together and lift them up. But with all that being said, I wanted to go ahead and start telling you about Angelina, who should still be here today. Angelina Camilla Gonzalez, or Angel, as she was called by her loved ones, was born on January 7th, 2007, and she was living in Azusa, California with her mom, Letitia, and her stepdad, Robert. She also had an older brother, Ruben, and he says that Angel was bubbly, funny, always cracking jokes, and that she went into everything she did in life with determination. She was a senior at Azusa High School, and that is where many people got to witness as she proudly cheered on her fellow classmates. Cheerleading was definitely a big part of her identity, and it was just one of the many things that she loved participating in, but it wasn't just cheer. This is super cool, but she had actually recently joined the wrestling team and even won in her first match, which just goes to show you that she really was so determined and would really just work as hard as she could at anything that she tried. And also, as I mentioned, she was artistic and she was incredibly talented when it came to her art. In 2024, she actually won first place at the 31st District Congressional Art Competition, as well as the Judge's Choice Award in 2022, which meant that her art would be displayed at the U.S. Capitol. And just take a look at her art. I mean, wow, she was definitely deserving of all of that. Angel was someone who had a lot of options for her future, and everyone in her life was really excited to see what path she was going to take. And one thing that she was really looking forward to was her 18th birthday. And I'm sure if you are older than 18, you probably remember your 18th birthday and how excited you were to be officially an adult. I mean, it's such an exciting time in our lives. But there was really nothing to celebrate on January 7th of 2025 because 2.5 weeks prior, on December 20th, her life was senselessly taken from her. That evening, Angel had gone to a cheerleading banquet with her friends and other members of her squad. And from what's been reported, nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. However, later that night, her stepdad, Robert, realized that she never came home. And that was very unusual because Angel always came home. She was very responsible. And so Robert did what a lot of parents would do, and he checked her location on his phone. And I believe it was just the regular iPhone location sharing feature that he used, and he saw that she was actually somewhere familiar. She was at her ex-boyfriend, Daniel Rodriguez's house. Now, if any of you watched my episode from just a couple weeks back on Savannah Copeland, you're probably already seeing some similarities here. They were both teenage girls, both cheerleaders, and both had their location traced by a family member. And not only that, but both of them lost their lives due to fatal stab wounds, which, in my opinion, is one of the most brutal and personal, just evil ways that you can end someone's life. And how this all played out for her family is just devastating beyond words, because when Robert drove over to Daniel's house, he actually just pulled up to the crime scene. And officers had already swarmed the area, and he was told he wasn't allowed to go any closer. Instead, he and Angel's mom were asked to come into the station, where they were both told the earth-shattering news.
I came home and she wasn't in her bed.
When Angelina's stepfather noticed her phone's location was at her ex-boyfriend's house Friday, he drove there, and police tape was up when he arrived.
They wouldn't let me enter the crime scene. And I was trying to explain to them that my daughter's there. I'm trying to get my daughter.
He said officers then told him to go to the sheriff's station.
When we got there, they took my wife in to ask her some questions. And basically that's when they told us that she didn't make it and what happened to her.
Police had been called to the scene at 10 p.m. that night after a witness heard screaming, only to run outside and find Angel on the ground, bleeding from multiple stab wounds that she had sustained. And her attacker, who was very quickly believed to be Daniel Rodriguez, fled in his car. However, thankfully, they were able to find him and arrest him just the following day. Now, at first, it was only reported that her killer was an acquaintance, but Angel's family quickly clarified and identified him as her ex-boyfriend, someone who they say they had warned her to stay away from. Now, we don't actually have a lot of explicit details about their relationship, but considering how it ended, I think we can all reasonably conclude that it was not a healthy one by any means. And one thing that I've heard her loved ones say is that Angel was such a kind person. She was that type of person who always tried to see the good in people, even people like Daniel.
Well, a 17-year-old Azusa High School cheerleader stabbed to death. The man accused in her murder, an 18-year-old who she reportedly had a relationship with. KCAL's Jasmine Veal spoke with her family, and they say they warned her to stay away from him.
Pictures of Angelina Gonzalez show a smiling 17-year-old who loved cheerleading, music, cooking, and had just joined the wrestling team a few months ago.
She was just real determined, put her heart into everything.
Her older brother, Ruben Torres, says his sister had gone to a cheerleading banquet Friday night and never came home.
It was normal, like party with the school. She was with all her friends.
The LA County Sheriff's Department says Gonzalez was stabbed to death Friday around 10 p.m. on North Soldano Avenue in Azusa by an 18-year-old man whom they described as an acquaintance of the victim. He was taken into custody. Her family says her ex-boyfriend had picked her up from the event that night.
Police have yet to release every details. They showed us the video of her getting in his car.
One witness says she heard screaming and ran out to see Gonzalez lying face down on the sidewalk and a young man running away.
He ran out with no shirt on, got in his car, backed it up, almost hit the car behind him. I think they just said they were arguing.
Albert Fuentes, her wrestling coach, brought flowers Monday to a small memorial for her on that sidewalk.
She just had her first competition, she competed for the first time and she got her first win. She was so excited and so proud.
No parent should bury their child.
Her stepfather, Robert Caraballo, says he tried his best to protect his daughter from that relationship and doesn't want this to happen to anybody else.
I'm doing this because I want my daughter to be recognized, like her legacy to be recognized, and also for other teens that might be going through the same thing.
She was just so loving, like even in people like him, she tried to see the good in people.
And just in general, there's a very limited amount of information available on this case at this point in time. And that is why I normally don't cover cases this early on, but I decided to go ahead and move forward with it after hearing how her family really wants to keep her legacy alive and raise awareness so that other teens don't have this happen to them. So I know that it's very different from other cases I cover typically because we don't have a whole lot of information here. But I felt like Angel was such a wonderful human that it would be a great opportunity to not only share her story, but to also just tell you more about her, because everyone should have the opportunity to know who Angel was. And it's important to be reminded that life is incredibly precious. You never know when your last day with someone could be. And it sounds cliche, but you just can't take life for granted.
As a father to her, she was amazing. You know, we had a very close bond, very good relationship.
Her stepfather and brother at a loss for words over how the 17-year-old was tragically killed. Angelina was stabbed to death last Friday while at her ex-boyfriend's house after leaving a cheer banquet.
He was toxic and she dumped him. I'm guessing they were in his house arguing, and I guess she ran out.
I myself and my wife, we want to honor her legacy and make sure she's not forgotten.
It's important to tell your loved ones, your siblings, even found family, they don't even need to be blood related. Tell them you love them. Just be with them, because you just never know when stuff like this happens.
Now, you heard her brother Ruben start to mention this, but the motive in Angel's death is most likely related to the fact that she had dumped him. That being said, an official motive has not been released, but I think when we look at the circumstances here, that's what makes the most sense. Not that any of this ever makes sense, but you know what I mean. And I'm sure you can tell if you are watching this episode instead of listening to the podcast version of it that I don't even have a photo of Daniel at this point, which is something, I normally like to include. And I'm not sure why one hasn't been released, because normally they don't release photos when the perpetrator is a minor still, but Daniel was 18 when this happened. So I have no idea why there's no photos. I couldn't even find a booking photo from his arrest. And of course, that doesn't change the circumstances here at all. I just know people are going to wonder why I've not included a photo of him, and that's just because at this point in time, there isn't one available. It is possible that a photo will be released between the day that I'm recording this and the day that it is uploaded. So if that is the case, I will go ahead and include one. And I'm assuming that at some point in time, there will be a photo of him out there. And I hope that there is, because everyone should be able to see this guy, look at his face, and know what he did. But anyway, Daniel was officially charged with murder on Christmas Eve, December 24th. And unless he posts his whopping $2.02 million bail, he will continue to sit his sorry ass at the men's central jail in LA County. And he faces up to 26 years in prison if convicted. And he's currently pleading not guilty to his charges. And in my opinion, 26 years is not enough. And that's only if he actually gets the 26 years. So we're going to have to see how this plays out. A court date was scheduled for February 26, 2025 to determine if there was enough information to move forward with a trial against Daniel. And to my knowledge, things are proceeding forward. And I really don't see any reason why they wouldn't. So that same day, her loved ones and supporters gathered outside the Pomona Superior Courthouse to demand accountability for Angel's murder. And if there's one thing I'm certain of, it's that these efforts are not going to stop until justice is served. And I really do say that with confidence because the rally for justice from this family and their community is something that's been so beautiful to see. And it really started from the very beginning, right after Angel was killed. That GoFundMe I told you about earlier was started to help raise money to cover the cost of her funeral, and they've since raised over $33,000. Angel has since been laid to rest, with her funeral taking place on January 20th, 2025, where hundreds of people came together to mourn this gut-wrenching loss. And even though the service already happened, I do want to encourage you guys, if you're able, to still consider supporting their GoFundMe, because the financial toll that violent crime takes on a family is impossible to prepare for. And just focusing on paying for basic needs on top of fighting for justice is something that they shouldn't even have to worry about. And like I said earlier, my team and I are going to be reaching out to try and get them a HOPE grant. And I really hope that we're able to get in contact. I'm sure we will. And hopefully that will be helpful to them as well. One of the things that we're able to do with the HOPE grant is we can actually reimburse for past expenses, including something like a funeral. We can also pay off existing invoices for anything related to the crime. And by doing this, it helps put money back into the hands of the family so that they can use it for other things they may need. I also wanted to highlight something else support-wise that took place because I think it's a really great example of how this community came together. So when they were still raising money for the funeral, they ended up hosting a car wash / bake sale event. And when I say the community of Azusa showed up, I mean they showed up. There was a long line of cars down the street and around the block waiting to be washed, and hundreds of people came to buy food and show this family that they were there for them.
An outpouring of love today in Azusa after a brutal crime. The community comes out in force to support the family of a teenager allegedly killed by her ex-boyfriend. Fox 11's Laura Diaz is live for us. Laura?
Susan, on this holiday weekend, we have a community in mourning, but friends and family of Angelina, they got to their feet today to show support for the victim.
It's just a very, very sad loss. It's going to devastate all of us.
It's been a little over a week since 17-year-old cheerleader Angelina Gonzalez was fatally stabbed after a cheerleading banquet. Investigators say the suspect, her estranged boyfriend, picked her up after the banquet December 20th and took her to his Azusa home where he stabbed her. The girl with the big brown eyes died of her wounds later at the hospital. Saturday, hundreds of people gathered in Angelina's honor not far from her neighborhood. There were anguished hugs. There was a car wash and food, and hopefully some comfort too.
You know, I expected a big turnout, but not this big, and I know why, because she was so loving and so caring.
This is Angel's way. This is her putting this together. This is something she would do. If she was here, she would be doing the same exact thing
for someone
else.
The huge fundraiser included many of Angelina's classmates, fellow student athletes from sports teams. Bikers rolled in too. Angelina's cheerleading coach praised Angelina and said the community celebrated her beautiful life.
Shows that we all loved and cared about her, and definitely that we're here to support the family.
I'm always really grateful when I'm able to cover cases when there is so much community support, because not every family gets that. It obviously doesn't take away from what happened at all, but it really does feel like a glimmer of hope. I know from families I've worked with directly how important it is and how much it really pulls them through. So the fact that this family has so many people rallying alongside them, and not just in their community, but across the country as well. And I hope that number grows by sharing her case with all of you. There really is no such thing as too much support. And in fact, the next court date is actually set for April 18th. and I know that they would love as much support from all of you as possible. So there is a Justice for Angel Instagram account that has been posting updates. So I'm going to go ahead and link that in the show notes in case you are in the area and maybe want to learn more about how you can show up for them. You can also follow the account to get updates on the case and let this family know that you're supporting their efforts to get justice. And I love when you guys do that. I love when I'm able to share a social media page or account and tons of you go that extra mile to just show that support, because that's another thing I've heard from families I've worked with directly, that is just so huge to feel like they have all these people that they don't even know that are standing behind them. And even just recently when we covered Barron's case, Barron Lee, he was so grateful and thankful to all of you who took the moment to follow him on Instagram and support everything that he is trying to do. And I also thought this was super cool. So among Angel's many supporters is Senator Susan Rubio of the 22nd State District of California. The California State Senate adjourned in memory of Angel, and Senator Rubio gave a really beautiful and empowering speech. So I wanted to go ahead and play that for you here.
Today I rise to adjourn in the memory of Angelina Gonzalez, who tragically passed away last month at the age of 17. Angelina was a bright light in the lives of all who knew her, a passionate cheerleader and student at Azusa High School. She brought energy, joy, and a spirit to all events she attended. But that joy and that spirit was cut short when she was killed by her boyfriend, and her future was robbed. Angelina will never walk down the aisle. She will never grow old. She will never fulfill all her dreams. It is unfortunate that domestic violence continues to rob us of incredible people and torture others. Of course, there were signs, but as domestic violence goes in our society, bystanders stay silent until it's too late. Recently, Angelina had taken on a new challenge by joining the school's wrestling team, embodying her fearless nature and determination to succeed in everything she set her mind to. Angelina, she had generosity, she was selfless. She was always the first to lend a hand or offer a kind word, and her radiant smile had always lit up a room. Angelina loved her family, friends, and teammates fearlessly, and her kindness left a lasting mark on everyone she met. Beyond her achievements, Angelina's true legacy lies in the love she gave so freely. She lived her life with a heart full of compassion, a soul full of dreams, and an unwavering dedication to lifting others up. Angelina, your spirit will live on in the hearts of all who knew you. And though our time with you is short, your impact will remain eternal. Angelina has reignited my fire to continue to fight abusers in the fight to keep families safe in domestic violence situations. Once again, she was a beautiful soul, and she will never be forgotten. She is survived by her loving parents, siblings, grandparents, and a wide circle of friends and classmates who will forever cherish her memory. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in adjourning in the memory of Angelina Gonzalez. Thank you.
I thought that was really powerful and something that we don't often see from our representatives. So I think for me personally, it helped to hear, more about Angel from Susan and get an even more clear understanding of who she was. Angel clearly made such an impact in her 17 years of life. And the fact that she is not here today, it's hard to even find the words. It's so wrong. It's so unfair. It's gut-wrenching. And at the very least, it shouldn't ever happen to anyone else, let alone a child. But we know that, unfortunately, it will. But that's why it's so important to talk about the ways that we can try and prevent cases like this from happening as much as possible. I played a clip earlier where Robert said that he's speaking out because he wants Angel to be recognized and to help others who might be going through the same thing. And that's why today I wanted to spend the last portion of this episode talking about domestic violence and also provide some resources, because it's something that you can really never get enough information about. Even if you are lucky enough to be in a stable, healthy relationship where you don't feel like you're in danger, it's so important that we understand that anyone around us, anyone in our lives could be in a situation like this at any time. And I think it's also something that is so important for parents to learn as much as they can about, because, my daughter, she's only 2.5, and I am so scared for her future just in the world that we live in, especially after watching Adolescence. I really do recommend it. It's a great show, and it sparks so many great conversations. So if you're a parent, it's, I think, an excellent watch. Very hard to watch, but very important. And I also want to encourage any survivors out there who may be watching, if you're willing to share, to even maybe drop a comment below and offer any advice or encouragement you have for anyone out there who could be going through a situation like this right now. And I know so many of you are. I mean, I see comments from so many of you who are in situations, in relationships where you don't know how to get out, or you have recently got out and you're dealing with the aftermath of that. And my heart truly goes out to you, because it is so common, is so horrific. And I feel very, very thankful that I have never experienced it myself. But yeah, it's something that I'm happy I'm seeing more conversation and discussion about it than I used to, but it's something I think needs to be talked about even more, because I don't think many people realize just how prevalent it is in our society. I hate that anyone has to experience domestic violence. I hate that any of you in my audience have been in an abusive relationship at any point or are right now. And to those of you who were in a violent relationship and you were able to get out of it, I just want you to know how proud I am of you. And also to those who are actively trying to get out of a situation that you know is not good for you, not safe for you, I'm proud of you for trying to take the steps or even thinking about how to get out. But I understand that it's not that easy. That's something that I think is a major misconception in society, is why don't you just leave? Because it can be very, very difficult to leave for so many different reasons. She was so young. Her parents really did everything that they could, as far as I know, to prevent this from happening. And sometimes it is out of our control. And she did leave him. I mean, we don't know the details of the relationship or what led up to that night. But, I think it's just something that parents need to be even more aware of. And that's why I'm so proud of Angel's parents for trying to spread awareness about the case to potentially, educate other parents and educate other younger people about what could happen. Now, my audience, for the most part, are women, which I love that. And so I wanted to share that data shows that 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence, as will 1 in 9 men. And that is also something I don't think we speak about enough in society, is that men do experience domestic violence as well. And 1 out of 9 men is a pretty shocking number. The statistics in general around domestic violence are very shocking. Around just violence in general are very shocking and upsetting and scary. But the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey reported that 35% of women and 28.5% of men have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. And if we take a look at just teens, nearly 1.5 million high school students nationwide experience dating abuse from their partner. 1 in 3 girls also report being the victim of physical, emotional, and or verbal abuse from someone that they've dated. Then there's the statistic that 1 in 10 high school students say they have been purposefully hit, slapped, or physically hurt by a boyfriend or girlfriend. And that's just those who have reported it, which I think is so important to remember and is something that is often forgot about when we're talking about statistics, because the data is incredibly alarming as it is, but it only represents the reported cases. So those numbers have to be so much higher. And there are countless reasons why someone wouldn't report their abuse, including the very real fear that they may be killed as a result. And then I think there's also a lot of people who don't report their abuse because they don't recognize that what is happening to them is actually abuse. And in my opinion, I think that's especially true in teenage relationships. And I know most people recognize that physical abuse is abuse, But that's just one form. There's emotional and psychological abuse, which can include but isn't limited to name calling, bullying, shaming, intentionally embarrassing, and constant monitoring. There's financial abuse. Of course, there's sexual abuse, which is when one partner forces their partner to engage in a sexual act against or without their consent. Of course, there's also stalking, which can include one partner following or harassing the other partner in a way that causes them reasonable fear for their safety or well-being. And I'm sure it's no surprise, but social media can also perpetuate that abuse. And I think that's especially true when it comes to younger people. And that's another really important topic that adolescence really highlights. And this is also definitely an area where I think it might be more difficult for someone who's younger to identify that these behaviors aren't healthy. And I know I also have a lot of younger viewers out there, so I wanted to share what these behaviors look like. And to clarify, these don't just apply to young people. So it can look like telling you who you can and can't be friends with on social media, monitoring your social media, also your email and your text messages, stealing or forcing you to give them your passwords or let them see your device, hold your device, look through your device, sending you mean messages either directly or anonymously. And this is a big one, convincing you to sext or to send pictures of yourself when you don't want to by using threats, coercion, force, or guilt. And I don't want to brush past the guilt because I think that is one of the biggest factors when it comes to this. And we've all experienced what guilt feels like, right? Like it's one of the most difficult things to overcome and to process. It's one of the things I've spent probably the most time in therapy learning how to deal with the feelings of guilt that someone else can put upon you. And in teen relationships, and of course, even in adult relationships, guilt can really be used by the abuser to get the victim to comply with whatever it is they want them to do. And that could be something like having sex with them or sending explicit photos or convincing you to isolate from your friends and family, to not spend time with certain people. I mean, there's so many different examples of how this can be applied by an abuser. And another big form of abuse that I don't think is talked about enough, I know we talk about it a lot on this show because it happens in so many cases, but that's isolation. By separating their victim from others, the abuser can create this sense of dependency, like they are the only person that you have. And that's how they want it because they want to have the ultimate power over you and don't want you to be influenced by others or convinced by others that you are in a bad situation. So isolating you from those you love is a huge tactic we see all the time in these cases and in just domestic violence cases across the board. So you want to watch out for signs of it. And that can include not letting you see your friends and family or getting annoyed and upset when you want to spend time with others, or even something as small as texting others, wanting to live together very early on in the relationship, wanting to move away from your support system, making you feel guilty, there's that word again, for spending time with others, telling you that your friends and family don't understand your relationship, and being overly concerned with what your friends and family say to you. And all of this really only scratches the surface because abuse can look and sound like tons of different things depending on the relationship. It's different from relationship to relationship. But I genuinely believe that knowing what it can look like and sound like is a very important step in recognizing when you or someone you love is experiencing it. And so another thing I want to talk about today, and I really appreciate you guys who have stuck around and are taking the time to listen to this because I know it's not easy and it's very different from typical true crime content. I know a lot of people just want to hear the details of the mystery and the crime, and there's not a lot of that in this case, but I think this case sparks such an interesting and important conversation that doesn't get had enough, that I just wanted to take the time to do that today. So to all of you who are still out there listening, truly, I thank you. So let's talk a little bit more about prevention. And educating people about the signs of abuse is a huge part of that. You know, this is what it looks like. So these are behaviors to not engage in. And I also think it's important that we educate young people about what a healthy relationship looks like. And I see this theme in a lot of the cases that I cover, but I think conflict resolution is massively ignored, and also rejection. Can you imagine what it would look like if we spent more time as a society helping younger people understand how to handle rejection and obviously that can be taught at later stages of life as well. And I wanted to go ahead and link an article I found from the Child Mind Institute titled How to Help Kids Deal with Rejection, because I think it's a very useful resource. And then I'm also going to link a PDF that goes over tools for healthy communication and conflict resolution. And one thing that I especially can't say enough is that if someone comes to you and tells you what is going on, believe them. Try your best to be someone that they can feel comfortable confiding in, and help them try to come up with a safe way to get away from their abuser, which is in most cases harder than it sounds. The most dangerous time for a victim of domestic violence is when they are trying to leave. And so I really want to emphasize that coming up with a plan that ensures their safety is very, very important. But it's something that a lot of us don't know how to do. And I wish I could lay out a roadmap, but because every relationship is so different and every situation is going to be a case-by-case situation, so I really don't feel like I can comfortably or responsibly provide a generalized exit route, but I know that there are countless amazing resources online. I'm going to link the National Domestic Violence Hotline in the show notes of this episode, as well as the number for the Teen Dating Abuse Hotline. And I really recommend that you actually take the extra step to save these numbers into your device, because you never know when they could come in handy. And I also just wanted to give a little shout out to an organization that I love. It's called the Crisis Text Line. That is definitely a resource to keep in the notes of your phone, or just to know how to access easily, because they offer a huge variety of services and can really help in so many different situations, and they are easily accessible. And I don't think enough people know about them. The work that they do is incredible. I've spoken to some of the people that work in the organization, and I just really can't say enough good things about them. And also the Teen Dating Violence website has great resources as well. So you'll find that linked below. And then I'm also going to link the Joyful Heart Foundation, which for any of my Law and Order SVU fans, this is the foundation that was started by Mariska Hargitay. And she is actually the actress who plays Olivia Benson. It's a national organization based in New York, and it has a mission of transforming society's response to sexual assault, domestic violence, and child abuse as well. They also seek to support survivors who are healing, and they want to end this kind of violence forever. And when I was looking into all these resources, I really did find so many great ones. So this is definitely not all of them that are available. It's always a great idea to do your own research and find resources that are better suited for you as well. And on that note, also, I would love if any of you could share any resources that you have found to be helpful or know someone else has found to be helpful in the comments. I'm sure that would be greatly appreciated by so many out there. Angel's case is a heartbreaking reminder of how an abusive relationship can end. And if I can help spread even an ounce of awareness and help one person, then I wanted to take the time to do that today. And also, if you guys didn't know, whenever I'm covering an active case like this, I will go back and have in the pinned comment any updates that have come out since recording, in case you ever want to go back and see any updates there. Of course, you can just do a Google search on the case yourself, but I will have something pinned there as well. And also, whenever I say in my episodes that I'm going to be reaching out to families to try and get them a grant from my foundation, I always, put an update there as well in the pinned comment or in the description box. Or you can just go to our Instagram page, which is higherhope.org, as well as our website, which is higherhope.org. And just while we're on that note, if you didn't know, we have recently released our 2024 impact report, which goes over how every single dollar was spent in 2024. Granted, we just launched the foundation in September, so it's less than we are planning to do this year or hoping to do this year. But if you're interested in actually seeing what we're doing, we're very transparent about where every single dollar is spent. So go ahead and check us out if you're interested. And I would really, really appreciate a follow on Instagram, because we are trying to reach as many people as possible and make the biggest impact we can. Again, I know that my approach to this case and covering this case is very different from my typical coverage on cases, but I really appreciate those of you who took the time to listen to Angel's story. And, talking about all of this is really important also because it has become a huge mission for Angel's family. And I think it's a great way that we can honor her. And if anyone in Angel's family or her friends sees this episode, I want you to know my heart is so broken for you. I cannot imagine what it would be like to be in your shoes right now. And I think that you've already shown so much strength and perseverance at this point in time. I mean, we're only in like Q1 of 2025. This just happened at the very end of 2024. And there is so much that their family, her loved ones, and the community is doing already at this point. It's really amazing and sort of renews my faith in humanity. But that is going to be it for me today, guys. I will be back next week to discuss another case. And until then, please stay safe out there.